but I just now turned on my audio recording, and so the quality of my track may be a little bit different um, right now than it was before. It should be a little bit better right now. So, yeah, I didn't believe that Christians should vote. And the reason I didn't is because what Christians were vying for, as I saw it, was a place at the table, a place at the political table. But it was the wrong place at the wrong table, because Christians were supposed to be citizens of heaven, citizens of the kingdom of heaven, and heaven does not allow dual citizenship. And so there was a type of political reality for Christians that was defined by God. And it was a political reality that held true no matter where Christians were in the world. They were there as staffers of an embassy, right? They were more like ambassadors and not like citizens. And ambassadors, what they don't get to do is meddle in the politics of the place where they are. They're not kingmakers. They're not policymakers. That's not what they're there for, right? They do get to vote in their own country or participate in whatever political system that their country allows. But the place where their embassy happens to be, that is in fact not their country, not their home. Now, in a very interesting dialectic, I would say, an embassy is technically the home country. So the American embassy in Russia is literally U.S. territory. Step outside of the gate of the embassy and you're in Russia. Inside of the embassy, you're in the U.S. This is how embassies work. So if we were taking it seriously, that this world is not our home, and that we live in another kingdom, that we were not citizens of this world, but rather inhabitants with a citizenship elsewhere, then that would put limits on the involvement that we could have in the systems of this world. And it seemed further to me that God had given us a role in this world to be the salt of the earth, to be the light of the world, to be exemplars, in other words, of what Christian communities look like, of what kingdom living looked like, so that when people saw us, they would see, in effect, Jesus. They would have a window into our actual kingdom by looking at us and how we lived and how we took care of each other and how we loved one another. That is how we had influence in the place where we were. As far as the leaders, we were to pray for the leaders. We were not to overthrow the leaders or become the leaders. We were to pray for the leaders. Well, who put the leaders in place? Well, God did. But is that only true for America and Western countries? Well, no. If we go back to the Tower of Babel, God saw humans in great cooperation doing things so that God, in his own words, said something to the effect, if left to themselves, there's nothing that they can't do. We have to stop this. And so God separated humans and their languages, and one can then surmise from that this is how we got different political systems, whether it's a monarchy or communism or dictatorship or, in our case, democracy. God appointed it all, and he did not appoint one above the other. In fact, when God did have his hand in creating a political system, he didn't create anything that looked like a democracy. So it seems very odd now that those in democracies are suggesting that somehow this is how God communicates himself to the world, as opposed to all those other systems. Then we have Romans 13, which we will not get into now in this particular statement. Look it up, read it, love it. But how do leaders get appointed? Essentially by God. God appoints the leaders, and it is God's job to appoint the leaders, and it is our job to respect the leaders and obey the laws to the extent possible. When there is a conflict, obviously, we ought to obey God rather than man. But that is the extent of our conflict with the law. Now, this was a strict theological position. And when I look back over it today, even though I'm no longer a Christian and I'm no longer a political conservative, I still believe that this is the correct theology. You only need ask a Christian, why do you vote? Why do you vote? Hopefully we can talk about this today. Why does anybody vote? Why does a non-Christian vote? Because I also want to talk about the limits of rational political involvement for anybody. I think there are limits. So why do we vote? Well, as a secularist, I vote because it's the only way I have to express my desire to effect change or to have a particular set of policies and principles to deliver a mandate to leaders. That's why I vote. There's no one magically overarching everything and everyone that is going to make things right. But Christians have that. Christians are a part of a kingdom already. They are a part of the kingdom of God. They've got a king. They don't vote for kings. They got it. And they don't move around leaders on the world like chess pieces. That's God's responsibility. And so to me, the only reason a Christian would vote is because they don't believe those other things work. And they want control of the system like we have. Because they don't believe that there's a God who's actually in control, who actually sets up leaders, who actually puts them exactly where God wants them, whether it's in China or India or an Arab nation or the U.S. It's God who put you there, and it's God who put that system in place, and it's not for you to tell God that this is the wrong system. So why do you vote? Christians. We don't have any on the panel right now. But I would like a live answer to that question at some point, because I think it reveals something about Christian involvement and how they really feel about their God and their beliefs. So finally, and I will throw the doors open for discussion. One of the things that Christians will say is, well, we're just enjoying our God-given rights to vote. We live in America. God put us in America, and America has the right to vote. And so God gave us the right to vote. And so we're voting because God gave it to us. Okay, maybe they don't have the right to vote in China. God didn't give that to them. He gave it to us. I would disagree. God gave you marching orders already as citizens of his kingdom and gave you limits as to what you can do in this kingdom. So if this kingdom, just think about this, if this kingdom said it's okay to murder people that you don't like, if that was a law and people would go around murdering people they didn't like, would Christians be able to say, yeah, I murdered that guy, but the law says that I could do it? It's the law that I could murder people I don't like, and God put me in this system where that's the law, and so I'm just obeying the law. No, you can't do that. You can't say that and still be a Christian. And so it's not an argument. So as I round this off, a Christian would not make that argument today if someone passed a law saying it's okay to murder people you don't like. And so they cannot make that as a primary argument for why they vote. They can't just say, well, we have the right to vote, and so therefore we should vote. It doesn't make sense. We have the right to be involved with this government, so we get to be involved. We have a right to overthrow the government, therefore we should overthrow it. You have now traded your God-given role for a man-given role. I've talked for about 20 minutes, but I had this in my gut to say, and I wanted to say it. Let me just repeat for anyone who shows up on the panel. You may turn on your mics at any time and make commentary Uh, Darren, since you are the stand in co host, I will give you a chance to respond to some of that.
Um, yeah, I haven't been political for very long. I was in the military when 9/11 happened, and I got to watch the second Bush lie his way into a war. Um, but I,
So, if I can
from,
interrupt you for just a half a second, I was working on a military base at that time. And at the time the planes actually crashed, I was in the shower and I was staying with some very conservative friends because I was a very conservative Christian at the time. I was getting ready for the day's work when that happened. And I did go to work that day. It was, let's just say, considerably more difficult to get on base. But yeah, so that was kind of my military connection with that. It was a very weird time. Go ahead.
yeah, it was crazy, and watching the second Bush use religion and lies to get us into another war just put a sour taste in my mouth. It's one of the reasons why I've been staunchly against religion and government becoming one thing. And it's been terrifying for me over the years to watch Christians enacting laws to force their religion onto other people. Especially considering that the religion itself is declining in America. Um, as far as what you were talking about earlier, it just seems to me that I mean, I was never in that sort of that Christian bubble, so I don't really have a lot to say about why Christians would want to vote or not want to vote. But it just seems to me that if uh, after being in sort of the apologetic sphere for so long, that a lot of the apologetics arguments disappear or are undermined if what you said actually, you know, is how the normal Christian thinks of things. Because if God is determining who goes where, then the whole free will argument for anything goes away. Because how exactly does God appoint leaders? Does he mind control them into becoming that? Does how what are what are the mechanisms behind that? Um, William Lane Craig uh, went ahead and recently reiterated that if God tells you to murder babies, then that's exactly what you do. So um, I don't. There's just a huge disconnect, I guess, for me for the whole between the whole Christians in politics and Christians trying to defend their religion.
So I believe it or not, I do want to go there. I want to go to the God of the Old Testament and how politics were handled there at some point. But I do think it's a fair observation to ask how exactly does what is the mechanism by which God appoints rulers? So if you take Romans 12, as a literal thing, um, then how does God appoint rulers? Because we know how rulers often come to power in the world. They often come to power by assassinating the person who was in power before them. you know, so
So,
does God appoint rulers by assassination? Sometimes and quite often it's just through deception and manipulation. Does God then use that to appoint rulers? Um, God appoints rulers in some cases by political corrupt, the corrupt political power fixing elections. So Putin. Technically, they have a type of democratic system in Russia. You see, the people voted. It's Putin. Except we know that that's not the case. But does God appoint rulers that way? And if he can appoint rulers that way, then why couldn't he appoint rulers in America via stolen elections? I mean, I'm not suggesting that an election was stolen. I'm just saying that if you think it was, why would you think that somehow that would be wrong? That would be, God would never appoint a ruler that way, but he appoints rulers in all of these other ways. Now, I know I cannot make people say things on the board, but there are two people in the chat that are smarter than us right now. And I really wish they would come and save us from ourselves just a little bit. So I'm just going to give a moment of silence of about 5 seconds and see if I can pressure one of them into talking.
Peer pressure, you gotta love it.
Okay, that didn't work. So
Their will is strong.
the force is strong in those. Okay. Look, I can't blame anyone for not wanting to say things about this issue right now in these times. I've had a long
Politics and religion at the same time.
right, the two things that you should never talk about. Um, so let me give a little bit of personal history before I go further into the topic. There was a time in my life when I was a 24-hour news junkie. I was a political animal through and through. It's the only thing I watched. It was the only thing on television worth watching, and I watched all of it, all of it that I could. I cared about it. I knew the names of the congressmen and the senators and the various bills and the the high court. I knew all of that stuff. I knew what was going on in the country and around the world way more than I knew what was going on, with my next door neighbor. My own community, my city. So I was that person for a while, probably for a kind of long time, several years. And in that time, I don't know exactly what shook me out of it, but something did. And I realized that I don't want to be that person. I don't much like that person. That person does not seem to be focused as much on the things of the kingdom of God as the things of the kingdom of this world. I don't know what it was. I'm not going to say I reasoned my way out of there. I'm not going to say that there wasn't some event that did it. I don't remember, but I do remember making a hard turn and saying, "This, I can't do this anymore. I have to stop this. This is unreasonable." And from that time till now, politics has been not even secondary for me. Uh, Personally speaking, I just don't give a damn. I don't want to give a damn. I don't want to fall back into being the person that was that political animal. And you might say, well, the pendulum has swung too far the other way if you don't give a damn considering all that's going on in the world. But, I'm 50, I'll be 54 years old. And actually, I'm 54 years old now. Never mind, I've had a birthday. um, I'm old enough now to start forgetting how old I am. Um, Very sad. That said, I've lived long enough through enough administrations, good and bad, to realize that it is very, very difficult, at least it used to be, for one person in the White House to affect much of any change that could break America. The best they get is 8 years, and they may not get all of that. And there are enough checks and balances built into the system so that we should be okay, even if we get an absolute fool in the White House. And I think that largely that's been true for a long time. And I will say that when it comes to my own personal fortunes, when I started paying more attention to my family than, my senators, I can recognize that over time, I've done well no matter what the administration. Uh, I did I did well under Clinton. I did well under Bush too. I did well under Obama. I did well under Trump. I've done well under Biden. And I would say that, I'm not making nearly the money that I used to, but I have one of the best jobs right now that I've ever had. Um, so I'm fine. Put Trump in, put Biden in, put Snoopy in. I don't. I'm doing okay, right? I find a way to navigate the tide, whichever way it's moving at any given time. And I think we have to pull ourselves back from the brink of thinking that the fool in the White House at the moment is the one that determines our immediate fortunes. And I don't think that's the case. So that said, there are people that I would rather not be in the White House for any given time, especially when there are judges to be appointed, because those are lifetime appointments and that sort of thing. But in the grand scheme of things, whatever their military strategy is, whatever their economic strategy, um, you can do well in those systems. And so there, for me, it's just not justified to lose your mind during election season as if this is the moment where the sky is falling. I don't buy that. Uh, would anyone, Dale, like to challenge that idea?
Sorry, what?
I figured you may have been listening while you were there, but I just never mind. I noticed when you came in, you were there in time to hear most of that speech as I waxed on about my political apathy.
Okay, like should we be interested in politics and stuff like that?
Why?
I
Yeah,
guess, right? Yeah.
yeah. I mean, yeah. I know that you didn't hear my opening remarks, and some of that might get a bit of a redux as we go. But uh, in particular, the last thing I was saying was I think that I went from a person who cared a lot about politics. That was everything to me, 24-hour news junkie kind of person, to a person who's politically, at least on a personal level, fairly apathetic,
Mm.
and that my fortunes don't turn based on who happens to be sitting at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Yeah, so for me it was kind of the opposite, I guess. Like I was fairly politically apathetic um until the until Biden came into office, mostly, I guess. Kind of thing, until, yeah, it's only kind of recently that I became a little bit more interested in politics and that sort of thing. But yeah, in terms of the question of this, okay, what are the limits of Christian political involvement? I still have my priorities straight in that, yeah, Christianity is first to me. Theology and philosophy of religion are still paramount to me, but I don't see that as being mutually exclusive. I'm as a Christian, it's part of proper Christian doctrine that you should be interested in what's going on in the world. We're not to be monks that separate ourselves off and isolate ourselves off as though, oh yeah, we're not a part of that wretched world, and stuff like that. We have no involvement in that. Let these sinners rip themselves to shreds, and who cares? No, we are supposed to get involved. And this is especially true in a modern democracy, which, again, a totally foreign, well, not totally foreign, but it was not the case at the time the New Testament was written and that sort of thing. But we live in a democracy. We, as Christians, are citizens of the country. We are political agents. We, the people, are the government, right? The people that we elect are elected to represent us and our wants and to lead us and stuff like that. So I think that we do have a role. We can't just be apathetic towards politics entirely. We have a role, responsibility, and a duty to care about it and to do our best to apply Christian principles in our political lives, just as much as we do in our work lives and all of our other lives.
So,
So,
so why do
yeah.
you suppose that God didn't establish a democratic republic uh, instead of the monarchy?
why do I suppose he didn't? I think his main goal at that time, his main goal is always the top priority of saving as many souls as possible, right? So that's the fundamental purpose for why Jesus came in the first coming, to kind of transform the world from within. Okay, I will
Okay.
enjoy my IHOP. No worries.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Mr. Brian Y, you are open. you're, you're just I want look, I want the stuffed French toast. Strawberries to stuffed French toast. I think there is something political to be said there, but I am not going to try to dig it out.
I will say I am annoyed. Where's Mac is supposed to be here? I wanted to hear his thoughts
I
on this, but I
I
guess
know, and I have not. I can't raise him on email, and so I just assume that something catastrophic happened. Catastrophic, not like he got hit by a bus, but that something beyond his control at work may have happened. So I don't know.
yeah.
These things
So
happen. So welcome to the show and being the only Christian representative on the
well, see,
show.
I wish that I had time to prepare because it's not going to be. You can't press me too hard for like specific details and stuff if I haven't had time to research them and stuff like
Look,
that.
I did a 20
But
minute monologue that you could discuss if you had heard it, but you didn't. So I understand that you don't have time to prepare. And in fact, no
but
one,
I'll answer your question
yeah,
there, kind of thing, right?
no one who showed up here was expecting to be on the show, so, except for
Okay,
me.
fair enough. Well, okay, well, fair enough. So, but yeah, so again, that's Jesus' top priority, right? It wasn't about setting up a
Okay, but
political kingdom,
Jesus didn't set up a government, though. I'm talking about God
correct?
at the time of King David, when God could actually set up a government the way he wanted to from the ground up. It wasn't a democratic republic or anything that looked anything remotely like that.
Yeah, so I guess when he set up, obviously, when he set up the monarchy with King Saul, um, this was in uh, kind of a compromise to what the Israelites wanted. They were so sinful and corrupt. They didn't like the perfect theocracy God had set up through his prophet Samuel.
Great, but
That was
we'll
God's
note that his
ideal.
perfect theocracy was also not anything like a democracy or a monarchy.
Right. So they had the even more ideal, the perfect thing. Their leader was God directly, and God expressed himself through the prophet. What a perfect system. That's what the future government will be like in the when Jesus returns. We're not going to be in a democracy. We're going to be in a theocracy. So yeah, that was the perfect system. But then they rejected that. So God compromised and gave them what they wanted. They wanted a monarchy like the rest of the nations. That's what the people wanted, and God gave that to them.
So
Uh,
why would Christians assume then that God favors a secular democracy over, say, a monarchy? Why suddenly is America the perfect instantiation of God's political will?
I didn't say it's the perfect instantiation of God's will, but it is better than a monarchy
Why?
system. Why is it better? Because it better represents the people, and there's less potential for abuse. There are more checks and balances of the powers
Okay, well then I've gone in a full circle. Then why didn't God instantiate that instead of a monarchy?
because the people didn't want that. They wanted a monarchy. So he accommodated their request.
Okay, but at no point did he say, "Hey, look, guys, I've got something even better. It's called democracy, and you're gonna love it." At no point, 0 points
Why
in
would
this
he have
process.
why would he have to do that? He gave them something better than a democracy. He gave them the perfect theocracy, the perfectly moral leader that ever existed. I mean,
Okay,
theocracy is better than democracy. So if they have the best system that ever existed politically and they're rejecting that, He knows they'll reject a democracy. They'll, what's that? Oh, I don't care what the Greeks are doing 500 years from now. No, I want a monarchy. I want a tyrant to rule me. That's
Okay,
what these people were saying.
so
Right?
God
So
has two shots. One is his own system, which is a straight theocracy. Two, the system that he allowed, and then participated in was a monarchy. So at no point in history did he ever show favor towards something like a democracy. Uh, and
wait,
even
what
in
do you
the
mean? Romans 13 says God is the one who appoints every government. So he must have
which
appointed the Athenian, which includes the
totalitarianism,
Athenian democracy.
which
And
it
when
also
Republic,
includes totalitarianism.
yeah,
Okay, but I'm saying then that being the case, you can't show why democracy would be more favored by God than a monarchy or a totalitarian government.
yeah, I can by showing that it's better. It,
By
it
by by
it's
whose
more
standard?
consistent with God's principles for having a good government rule over.
Then why didn't God just establish democracies?
You keep asking the same question.
Well, it keeps being relevant. If God established all of these governments and he did not suggest one was greater than the other or worse than the other,
Okay,
what
let me
right do
ask.
we have to
Yes.
say that one is better or worse than the other?
Wait. Okay, so what right do you think that it would have been right for God? Should God have said when the people of Israel demanded, we don't like perfect theocracy, God, we want a monarchy? Should God have said, no, you're getting a theocracy, and or no, you're getting a democracy? Oh, what? Oh, I've never heard of that. That's what you're
Yes,
getting. Like he should have enforced on them a
yes,
system.
just like he enforced upon them things like don't wear clothes with mixed fabrics. God can enforce anything he wants to.
No, you can't. I don't think
He
so.
can't really.
There,
So
I don't
you mean
think
to tell
there's.
me that there are things he can't enforce, but he can tell you what kind of clothes you can wear?
Yeah, because I think that
Wow.
God is bound by his own morally perfect nature. He has to act consistently with his
Okay, so
own.
what's morally perfect about not eating shellfish?
Right, because if he had not done this, if he had not created these kosher laws and everything like that for the Old Testament Jews, we would not have salvation history. This was necessary for the Jews because of their sinfulness and hard heartedness
Okay,
to distinguish them.
then your real argument then is that, as I see it, your real argument is that God didn't establish democracy because at that time it would not have led to more souls being saved, and so he put forth and thus allowed the one system that would have worked for that time. I mean, that seems to be the real argument, and we just go back to
Yeah.
Molinism. But if you play that out, if you play that all the way out, which I am trying to do through the New Testament, through Romans 13, if you play all of that out, then you have to say that God established monarchies, uh, imperial systems, communism, totalitarianism, and democracy. And one cannot be said to be more elevated than the other because God established all of them.
No, I think they can be ranked, and depending on how they do. Look, communism, one of the most evil, satanic things that ever existed. If you just read it in theory, I had my old pastor, my cult leader at Midland Park Baptist Cult. He said, "Oh, I love communism," right? Because he's thinking about the theory. Yeah, yeah, in theory. Oh, yeah, maybe it's great. Some kind of impossible, infeasible Star Trek universe where everybody's equal, everybody shares all of their resources equally. No, but
Yeah,
it,
those fools
it,
in acts. I know what you mean.
yeah, don't think that the system in Acts was feasible to live on a societal level. You
Okay.
can't implement that on a societal level just because people are sinful. It worked for them as a small group, but it just doesn't work on a societal level. It'll never work. So that's my
Okay.
position on that.
Okay.
What was I trying to answer before you brought that up?
Before I rudely interrupted you, saying, uh, uh, yeah, you were trying to justify why you think that even though God uh, created all of these systems, that you can say, but we can rank them, and those other
Oh,
systems God made were worse than democracy.
yeah. So the Bible's clear that the government has a role and a responsibility to perform certain actions for the people. They are for the people, right? And on that front, we can look at these different governmental systems and say, how do they do? How are they doing in terms of fulfilling their responsibilities and facilitating the needs of the people that they are set up to do? And if they're failing and utter, like communism, is utter failure, and every time it is brought into practice, it does not bring about law and order. It brings about chaos and destruction and death in the form of the millions and billion, probably even billions, I guess, at this point worldwide. Who knows how many people communist governments have killed, stuff like that. So yeah, they are not fulfilling God's will on earth, and that's provable from a biblical
So
standpoint.
God made a mistake by appointing them.
I don't think he made a mistake in the grand scheme of things, because every government is providentially appointed for a purpose, right? Even the
Okay,
satanic evil ones, just like Babylon.
then it's not a mistake that communism works the way it does.
It's not a mistake on God's part that the communist regime came to power. But communism itself is a mistake whenever it's doing its thing, whenever it's not fulfilling its role as a government due to
I
human
don't see how you
sentience.
parse that out. I don't see how you parse that out because God knew exactly what communism would be before he instantiated it.
And doesn't he appoint the leaders as well?
Right? He knew who Putin would be. He knew who Putin would be before communism existed. So he didn't have to appoint communism. Uh, and so I'm not entirely sure on what basis you say, well, but communism is bad or it's a mistake. It's you're saying it's not a mistake, but it's terrible, it's evil, it doesn't work, but God did the perfect thing by instantiating it. I don't see how we can. That seems like a disconnect to me.
Okay, well, why would that be? Are you saying like I'm inconsistent with the Bible's teaching, or are you talking about the Bible's teaching itself as a disconnect?
I think you're being inconsistent with the Bible and yourself
Okay,
because you
okay,
can't
so
say on the one hand God instantiated all these forms of government and God is
well,
perfect and God knows what he's doing, and on the other hand saying that
okay,
communism is terrible.
okay, so why on earth did God appoint those satanic Babylonians and Assyrians? The Assyrians were known as the ancient. I wish I could arseholes of the ancient world, the
You want me to
ancient.
translate for you?
I'm sorry.
Do you want me to
Yeah,
translate for you?
the Assyrians. This was like a nation of Darren Lutz, for example, right? Like the most evil, corrupt.
He's right here. He's right
Oh
here.
goodness, here he is. Okay, but no, like the Assyrians, they were not a good government at all. They were pure evil incarnate, kind of thing, in terms of how they treated their own people and also the surrounding nations, especially, right? Like there's a reason everyone was terrified whenever the Assyrians were coming. God still appointed them, right? According to the Bible, God still appointed the Assyrian government.
Right.
So how am I inconsistent like that? The Assyrians were every bit as bad as the communists. Maybe they just could, because of the limited technology, they couldn't slaughter on the same scale, maybe. But if they could, they would.
But you are being inconsistent because you're not following your own Molinism. Your own Molinism should inform you that it's not up to you to know why God established the Babylonians and Assyrians and Persians. It's not. That's not your place to understand why God did it. And if you apply the reasoning that you use for everything else, he did it because he knew that the most souls would be saved under a system where the Assyrians and Babylonians and Persians rose to power and did the things that they did. That's why. That's the only why you need to know. And
Yeah,
so,
and to bring about. So, I mean, the Old Testament explicitly tells us why, and in that sense, right? And the fact that it's Molinistically bringing about saving souls as possible, but
okay,
it's also specific for Israel as well. right?
Okay,
Because
but
God is using that to judge
that's
Israel.
that's fine. You can cash that out any way you want, but right now, today, God is ordaining communism in Putin. God is ordaining
Wait a
France.
second. He
he's
appointed
he's
he appointed the governments, but who knows what he's ordaining in terms of
well, hang on. He didn't just appoint the governments, but the leaders.
right
So he did appoint, ordain Putin to be where he is right now, and he ordained crazy France
and he's
to
ordained
be what they are.
perhaps again
He
I don't
ordained
know.
he ordained the UK, no, in their form of parliamentary pseudo monarchy. Let's pull out of Europe government. He ordained that, and he ordained America in all of its confusion and
And he's
messiness.
ordaining, and perhaps again I don't know the details as in Russia and stuff. I don't know if Putin is a leader that needs to be overthrown, but let's say he is, right? Because obviously he's doing a lot of bad
Well,
stuff.
Who
So I,
who are
I
you to
probably would have.
determine which of
Wait! Don't
God's
don't
leaders should be
interrupt my
overthrown?
point. I'm making a point because I didn't come here expecting to be debating. I thought I'd be listening to you and Mac, right? So you got to be fair to me. So this, I'm just one against what four people that disagree with me. So yeah. So what I was saying is, and God appoints from the people to or otherwise to overthrow corrupt and evil governments if they after a time if they're not doing performing their job, right? So God, yes, God appointed Putin just like God appointed the Assyrians, but then God appointed the Babylonians to mop the floor with those Assyrians and take over because they were evil. And vice once the Babylonians became corrupt, same thing, the Medo-Persians came in and wiped them out and took over, and they were actually a pretty good government. I mean, there's a reason why the Jews in the history of Judaism have only called a couple of pagans the Messiah or given them the title of anointed one, Cyrus the Great, the Persian being one of them, right? So, yeah, like you're right. Just because someone's appointed doesn't mean they're untouchable, right? God can appoint others to take out those guys once they become bad.
Right, but you're missing the point that I am making, which is that it's God, not us, who decides who is appointed and when they're taken out and by whom and when. So, in other words, we can only know God's will after the fact. We do not have the insight into God's political maneuvering. And so you can't say, oh, yes, I know that this government is evil and that this other government that I favor would be better, and therefore God wants this other government. You don't know what God wants until he's done it, because he doesn't have to consult you. You don't have to understand his reasoning. And when you are using your own reasoning to decide who should be in power, you might be literally acting against God's purposes when you're doing that. And you've elevated your own political ideation and your understanding about what should be over what God ordains.
So in our private discussion with you, me, and Mac, I acknowledged this. I think there's something to this point, right? Because yeah, it's always God that's behind it, but I still am not persuaded on that you're right on this in a balance of probabilities. And the reason being is okay, well, okay, it's up to God to decide when this government's out. Great. How does he decide? What does he do? He uses the instruments of people coming in and as his instruments to overthrow these corrupt governments and do what they need to do to bring good government and law and order back as per God's true purpose for government, right? So it's always the people that bring about these changes, right? It's as you've complained as skeptics, why doesn't God just poof these evil governments out of existence? He doesn't do that way. He uses people to bring this about. And we can measure through divine revelation, we can ask the question, is the government fulfilling its duties properly or not? To the point where, okay, they've crossed the line, it's time. God is now ordaining us to step in and stop this person? Has it reached that point yet? Right. So
Right,
it
but
is people. That's
we
how it
don't we don't
works.
actually get those messages from God unless you're saying we hear voices from God saying, "Okay, I'm activating you to do this thing on my behalf." That we don't have that. And so in the Old Testament, God had actual, generals, people on the ground that he talked to and gave literal marching orders to. And so we don't have that today. And so at no point could a person say that, God now has told them to overthrow the government that it's time. But let me just
But
circle back.
we do, that's true. But will you at least acknowledge there are times when the Israelites go to war of their own initiative? They weren't given a direct command from God to go to war, and God was cool with that, right? Like
I'm not
there
sure
were
that I'm not sure that that's true at all. Um, so I think that the stories would be unclear uh, in those situations. But I want to circle back to something that Darren brought up earlier, and maybe drag him back into the conversation. Um, I thought it was interesting, and so I spent a little bit of time on it earlier. But it's interesting enough to bring up now that you're here. So the mechanism by which God appoints leaders. You were just saying something about that just now. You're saying that God uses humans as mechanisms to bring about change, but that's God using humans, not humans taking it upon themselves. There's a subtle but very important distinction there. But how does God? What is the mechanism by which He appoints leaders? And we know from history and the present that people take power in political systems in ways that are gross and disgusting. They murder their way into power, or they manipulate their way into power, or they have fake elections, Russia, their way into power. Uh, Things of that nature. They assassinate their way into power. And if these are mechanisms that God uses to get the person he wants in a position of power, why then can God not use a stolen election to get his person into power? If the people rise up against God's will, God doesn't count votes. God does not give a good him damn who you vote for. or
of
how
course he
many
does.
votes or how many votes a person gets. What he cares about is the person that he's appointing. And if the people rise up and say, no, God, we want this other person, God will just steal the election. He will put his person in power. You can't overthrow God's
No,
will in that sense. So why couldn't God use a stolen election in the same way that he's used assassinations and stolen elections in the past to put people in power? Why suddenly is that out of bounds for God now?
so God doesn't use those things. He allows the corrupt politician to do that, right? And then they are appointed to be in power. But if that's the way they come into power, then I'm automatically appointed to. So I forget what you said about Putin. They murder and what was the other things they
They
did to get
fake
into
they
power?
fake election their way into power.
Fake election, right? Cross the line. So immediately they are appointed to be in power for that limited time until the people come and remove him. But
Don't you mean until
whatever
God
options they have
removes
to
him?
remove that government. So yeah, then we were appointed immediately,
Well, but
right?
now you're just claiming an appointment by God that you don't have a right to claim. At least I don't see any right that you have to
Why not?
claim that.
If we're in power,
See,
we're appointed. Bottom line, right?
Just
So
but it
just a, just
seems
an interruption. We've got Mac on the line.
so you're
Uh,
done with me then. Okay.
I am not done with you. I just have to acknowledge the fact that this is another exciting episode of 4S. With Mac and David. How you doing? Let's get started. Mac, we are live streaming for what that's worth. I think we have all of two people
God,
live
yeah,
streaming.
Darren's saying seems like saying God appointed someone is largely meaningless.
So yeah,
No,
Darren,
it's,
I
it's
I don't want to interrupt Darren, but I do want to give Mac his full due
Okay.
as a host to come in and.
Before Mac comes in, can I just say one thing and then I'll go on mute and let you guys go do whatever you want to do. But uh,
I don't think you have to go
just
on mute. You've earned your right to be here. So go ahead.
okay. Okay, cool. But I do want to make it clear that as Christians, yes, I'm speaking about in extreme circumstances. There are lines where I think it's justified to use violence and overthrow a corrupt government that's evil and that sort of thing. And we've seen from David's examples, there are examples of God using people in biblical times to do this, to get rid of, he'll use evil governments like the Babylonian government for his purposes, and then he will get rid of them and stuff like that. So, but as Christians, we're not to be bloodthirsty. Our motives isn't revenge or out of anger, bitterness, stuff like that. Our motive has to be edifying to take out the corrupt government, bring in a good government that's doing its responsibility, biblical responsibilities and roles for the people, and playing within whatever system it is. And we should always look if there are available peaceful measures. And to some extent, okay, that might mean temporarily. Look, I think Biden has crossed the line personally at this point, but there are still peaceful options available. That's why I wouldn't support at this time, oh, well, yeah, let's get out the pitchforks and off with Biden's head. We're not at that point. There are still peaceful options, such as hopefully electing Trump in 2024 to fix this problem. So Christians, we always look for any and all available peaceful solutions first before we even consider using more direct means to get rid of these governments. And with that, yep, over to you, to Mac. So
Yeah,
yeah,
Mac. Uh, yeah, we've been talking for about an hour, so take it away.
I don't know if you'd have to give him like a primer as to what we're going on about. I think.
Well, he may have had an opening statement that he wanted to make anyway, but what you have to do, Mac, is unmute yourself. I mean, I could do it for you if you like. I can. I mean, just nod, blink 3 times if you'd like me to unmute you. Okay, I think I saw a blink. Let's see.
All right. Am I
Oh,
on?
yeah,
There
you're
we
on.
go.
There you go. You
All
got
right.
you got there before I did.
Again, sorry to the guests for my tardiness. I blew past my alarm. I'm so very sorry.
Yeah,
Um,
it
all right.
actually
So I don't
sounded
know what.
it sounded like you said you apologize for your turdiness.
Yes,
Um, and I think that's
that's a
appropriate.
different word.
It's-
Tardiness.
no,
Tardiness.
no, I like yours better.
The way I said it was different than how it's pronounced. But
No,
the word I used can also mean something else. So it's fine.
yes, it does. but
And my defense is I'm running on 2 hours of sleep. But
no, that's fine. I figured as much, and we went on because I come with a history of theater, and the show must
must
go
go on.
on.
Yes. So without knowing what you guys have been talking about, I initially, when I was thinking about how the show would go, like would pan out, I envisioned that you and I would end up being like in agreement more than you would anticipate. Like I was just seeing it in my mind that if you said something, I would agree with you. Maybe that's not the case, but that's just the mindset I had coming into this. Um, the topic is about Christian involvement in politics. To keep things short, like Christians should be involved in politics. Um, I know that's a pretty brief statement, but maybe it can be expanded out as the show goes on.
Sure. So let me see about my skills for recaps. So I did roughly a 20-minute opening um, on why I think why when I was a Christian I believed that Christians shouldn't be involved in politics, and this was my time as a conservative Republican and conservative Christian, and it was a purely theological case, which I will not completely recap now, but I think some of the highlights are we're kingdoms of heaven. I'm sorry, we're citizens of the kingdom of heaven. We're not citizens of this world. Heaven offers no dual citizenship. We are more like ambassadors. We're in the world, but not of the world. And our way to influence the world on behalf of the kingdom is to be lights to the world, salt of the earth. In other words, to be exemplars of what God's kingdom looks like and what it is to be a kingdom person. What does love look like? We have our own communities. We call them the church community, and we have governance for that, and we have ways of behavior that should be a calling card and magnet, and also a spotlight of shame almost to how the world does things. Because when they see how the church behaves so gloriously, how Christians behave so gloriously, they will understand what the kingdom of heaven looks like. They will have a glimmer into that. Where do we go as far as political involvement? I'll skip over a lot of really brilliant stuff. You'll just have to listen to the first 20 minutes of the show or read the
Yeah.
article that I'm working on later. But how does some of that end up looking? So what does God want us to? Well, I just talked about a little bit of that. I was going somewhere else before I interrupted myself.
What does God require? Is that what you're asking?
So God does want us to be residents of the world because we're here. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that God wants us to be the political leadership of the world. We have our own leadership, and we have our own leader. So no matter where we are, whether you are in oppressive communist China, or crazy ass France, or America, or Canada, as if that were a real place. No matter where you are in the world, deepest darkest Africa.
I resent that because we do have milk in bags up here. We have red cream soda.
I
Canada
have
is the
been.
best
I have
country in the
tried
world.
your red cream soda. I do like it. I have yet to see milk in bags. I don't think it's real. I don't believe in Canada. I did visit a place that they called Canada once upon a time, Vancouver, I believe it was. It was beautiful, but never mind. Um, yeah, so no matter where you are as a Christian, you have a government, you have a leader. That is a kingdom of heaven, and you have the same citizenship as every other Christian. You have the same duties on earth as every other Christian. And so the political system that you happen to be under at the time, whether it's democracy or communism or monarchy or tyrannical dictator leadership, does not matter to how you comport yourself in the world. And at no point did God give us the responsibility to overthrow the governments of the world or dictate to the governments of the world or change the governments of the world or make Christians by force of law through the governments of the world. That's not an authority that he ever gave anyone. So those are some of the highlights of
All right.
what
All
I
right.
said.
So a lot to work with there. All right. So two things. The part where I agree with you and the part where I disagree,
Mhm.
based on how I like what the Bible says. Uh, where I agree, yes, Christians are citizens of the kingdom of God. They do have that dual citizenship nature, and being part of the kingdom of God means that your mind is kingdom minded. You're thinking about the things that are above and not the things that are on earth. The part where I disagree with is because that first proposition is true, then that means that involvement in earthly politics is completely different, or rather is like it doesn't exist. So there's two ways in which people relate with politics or just the world in general. You have people who like become complete ascetics and they close themselves off. So in that case, you have people like the Amish who are just like, we don't want to get involved with anyone and anything. We're just going to be secluded. We're going to live over here, or like monks in Tibet. We're like, okay, you guys keep doing your thing. We're going to go over here and do our thing. Christians should not be like that. They shouldn't be escapists, uh, going out and just living life away from the hustle and bustle of the day to day. Uh, the biggest problem with Christian involvement, specifically Christian involvement in America, is the how of how Christians get involved. It's not that they are getting involved, it's how they do it. And how they do it is what's getting everyone all riled up. It's getting uh, people who are not Christians angry, and it's getting some Christians angry, and it's just making everyone all upset. And the reason for that is because the way Christians are getting involved in politics is the same way that secular people who don't believe in God get involved in politics. It's with the view that if secular people take over, then it's over for us. That's how Christians in 2024, at least the majority of them who vote Republican, are talking. They're like, if Joe Biden wins, then it's over for us, or it's over for the world, or it's over for this, or it's over for that. And with such a mentality, uh, from an unbeliever's viewpoint, you look at that and they're like, I don't believe as a like if I was an unbeliever, I look at that and I'll be like, I don't believe people who speak like that actually believe that there's a God. Because in a sense, you're like saying it looks like everything is just governed uh by chance, or maybe just maybe uh uh God is just trying very, very hard to make sure a certain outcome happens, but we're messing it up somehow. We're like throwing in our wrenches in, and we're just messing things up. And so, like, the biggest problem with politics in America is, at least from the Christian perspective, who are the vast majority, like the way Christians are engaging to the rest of the population who are not Christians. And it's like, okay, we don't even know for sure how many people are like Christian, and not cultural Christians like, like Richard Dawkins these days. The people who are not Christians look at how Christians get involved in politics, all the anxiety, all the hustle, all the bustle, all the oh no, what's going to happen, all the violence or threatening and saying we don't like it like this, we're just going to overthrow things. They look at that and they say, why would I want to be one of those people? So yeah, that's what I got for now. Does that
Okay.
does that make sense?
Yeah, I actually said something very similar to that in my long diatribe at the beginning. So yeah, I'm glad that we do find agreement in that, because, and I said this on a theological level and also a personal level. So I will say again a thing that will rile probably most of my audience. I don't mind angering my audience, though.
Forget the audience.
Uh,
You should find something that should rile me up.
well,
Um,
yeah, this is.
I don't want us to agree when politics is involved. People should be screaming and getting angry and
Don't worry, we've got Dell and Darren. That we got it's covered, brother.
uh,
Brother, we got it.
it's good.
Um,
Yeah.
so um, the on a personal level, uh, I did fine under Bush 2. I did fine under Clinton. I did fine under Obama. I did great under Trump. I'm doing even better under Biden. So, from a personal level, I don't give a damn who lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, because that does not directly affect my fortunes. It does not affect how I steer my ship. I know that that riles Christians too. You're not the captain of your soul. Well, yes, I am. So, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I've had good times and bad times under every administration that there has been, and whatever the administration is, whatever the rules are at that time, I just figure out how to make my way through, navigate those rules, and come out okay. And so, at a very personal level, I don't care if Trump wins. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care if Biden wins the second election. Neither one of those
You know what?
cats.
Like, yeah, it actually makes sense for you not to care because, in a sense, all of American culture has been conditioned to be okay with leaders like Trump. Like Trump, that's the guy who was on The Apprentice, right? He's that guy who's like, "You're fired,"
He was
and
great on The Apprentice. I loved that
people were
show.
cheering him on, right? I loved it too. people are cheering him on. He's like such a likable bad guy. And the thing is, like the culture just became enamored with celebrities. And so like if a guy like Trump wins an election, then that's just the culture that we made and grew up in and voted for in a sense subconsciously because we were like we value power and money and this guy being a rebel and shaking things up. And in a sense, like yeah, it's not surprising for America for Trump to win, but also it's surprising in a very bad way because it means that as a society we've lost uh the essence of what it means for someone to be a good leader. We just think we're acting like high school kids. We're like the popular kid should be the person who's the class president, like
Right.
and and it shouldn't be that way when it comes to American
Right.
politics.
So, look, I don't disagree. Let me just put myself in context. I have been a merchant for, part of my career. I did, the most money I've made was when I was in sales for a number of years. And merchants have always been able to succeed no matter what tyrant was on a throne. We just, figure out what the current rules are, and then we do that. If flags and mega hats are selling these days and we sell flags and mega hats, um, that doesn't mean that we don't have morals or values. It just means that we learn how to shift with a very fluid culture to do well in society, and in the along the way manage to do some good as we can. But we're not ideologues in the way that a lot of people are ideologues. We're pragmatists, and so pragmatists always do well no matter who is in power. And so this is one of the reasons why I just don't. I'm not that alarmed about it. However, that said, I'm more than a pragmatist because pragmatism is can also lead to a certain kind of selfishness. And so if I have to think about people beyond me who may not do well, what I'm thinking about are things like civil rights and social justice. That's where it matters to me. So I don't want people to hear this and think I don't care at all about politics. I do, because there are groups of people, when we look beyond the individual level, when we have a higher resolution, there are whole groups of people that can be disadvantaged under certain systems and administrations, and it might set back their cause to be equal humans for a
Uh,
decade. And so I do care about civil rights and social justice and things like that that can be affected. Uh, but once again, no matter who wins, we can still fight for civil rights and social justice. And so I think we just get a little crazy caught up in the occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue when it comes to determining our fortunes.
yes, like that obsession has grown a lot in the past two election cycles. Uh as opposed to like, electing your senator or your representative who has more of an impact than people actually know. So the thing is, people end up like, just voting down the card because, hey, I'm a registered Democrat. I'm just gonna vote for this guy I don't know because he's also a Democrat. Um, and that was not what the founding fathers had in mind when they came up with that system because you're supposed to elect someone who cares about like who's going to fight for you in Congress or in the Senate. Um, but mostly people have just fallen into this trap of like color voting. Like I'm red, I'm blue. I'm gonna go with the guy at the top. I'm gonna go with Biden, so that means I'm voting for Biden. Everything. Um,
Yeah,
and
I think
also
that's madness.
yeah, yeah, and then the downside of that is that okay, let's say you vote for someone else. Let's say you vote for a Republican in your state or something, but the president is a Democrat. then for like 4 years, that person is going to try and get policies through that are not going to go through because there's a bunch of Democrats who are saying no, or vice versa. They're always just going to be blocking the policies from going through, and it just frustrates everyone. But how that happens is because most people vote by tribe. They're very tribalistic. They're like, I'm going to vote my. They're not voting their conscience. They're voting their tribe. So I'm going to vote all Democrats. And at some point in American history, that became the precedent where people are just like, I don't care what I don't even know who my local senator is. Um, I care about who's in the White House.
Right.
It's like,
I wish it was not an option to vote a card, a straight Democratic ticket or a straight Republican ticket, because I think you can check that. I think you can check that box. Just do that. You should look. My dad voted for Carter one year and Reagan the next. Um, you know,
nice.
we were, you know, I didn't grow up as a political ideologue. We were mostly conservative Republicans, but we didn't have any loyalty to anybody. And there would have been years when my dad wouldn't have voted because both candidates stunk.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
so
that was an actual thing that people did, and like it was like the whole country was kind of in agreement. Like, yeah, these two people suck. Let's find better people.
yeah,
Um, but for the past 8 years, it just seems like we've been stuck with bad candidates from both sides, and it's like, okay, what have we got? Is this like, have we set this as a precedent for future elections, or are we gonna come to our senses in 2028, for example, when it's like fresh people, right? Fresh people on the ballot.
I
Or is it
think
just
I
gonna
think
be other clowns that
yeah,
we're like, okay,
I
these are the
think
lesser of two evils?
I think there's precedent for that, for saying let's sit it out because it doesn't really matter right now, and let's use this as a building year to set up better candidates. But I think this leads us into a topic that's very important, and maybe we can drag in some of our
Yeah,
guests again on
the,
this,
the
which
guests.
is what are the limits then? If let's say you say that it's okay for Christians to vote, let's just keep it at that level, and it's okay for seculars to vote, so everybody can vote. Yay, let's vote. What are the limits to your support of a candidate? And I'm not asking you personally, unless you just want to answer it personally. But we did have some discussion on the board. Uh, a comment in particular that said, "I don't care. It doesn't
It,
matter what
it
Trump
doesn't matter.
does. They
Yeah, I
can't
saw
lose
that.
my support." Okay, so great. Um, I think then for that person, there are no limits, right? Trump said himself he could go just and shoot somebody in Fifth Avenue. I don't think that was hypothetical. I think that he could, in fact, do it. I think he's the kind of person who would give it a try.
Yeah,
But
but like the thing is, everyone is treating Trump like this mega demon of a guy.
he's not a mega
And then
demon. He's
and
not a
then
mega savior. He's just a dude.
he's a guy, right? He's a person. But then you have people like on both sides, they're like deifying him. They're making him this savior of humanity. And then there's other people on the other side saying he's the worst person who's ever existed after Hitler or before Hitler. And they're like just saying these things, and you're like, wait a minute, hold on a second. So like,
I thought Clinton was a pretty awful human being. So
but the
what?
thing is like, okay, to answer the question about whether like how do you determine
Right.
how to
What are
vote?
the
Like
yeah? What are
obviously,
yeah? Your support. There's a difference, I think, between um. I don't know. I don't know exactly how to put this. It's. I'm not even thinking about voting as much as your actual moral support for a person. I want to prop
well,
this person up as the person of the future, and I think that there are plenty of things that both candidates could do where I would say neither of them have my support. And
well,
and and
Christians, yeah.
let me just finish this off. The most moral thing I could do, the most conscientious thing I could do, would be not to vote. It would not be to vote for the quote unquote lesser of two evils. I refuse to give my support to evil people. So if the only choices I got are Hitler or Mao, I'm not voting. I'm sorry. So what do you want me to do?
Well,
There are
they wouldn't
plenty
want
of
you to vote
things.
anyway.
There,
Uh-huh.
right. Well, there are plenty of things that people could do that would lose my support, and I can tell you, no politician has my quote unquote support anyway. That only very loosely can anyone be said to have my support. But you say
Right,
you
but
can't
would you never
lose my
vote for
support.
someone? Would you be like, I'm not gonna vote for the Democratic president candidate
Y-
this
y-
year?
yeah, I could be like that. Uh, I'm not like that. I'm not there yet, but I most certainly could. In fact, I spent most of my voting life not voting
Mm.
for that very reason. So, yeah, don't dare me not to vote. that's, that's, a, that's a very easy dare for me to take. So,
Yeah, yeah. People like, wasn't it like a huge slogan to vote your conscience of some few years ago, like or decades or
yeah, I don't even
something?
know what it means to
Uh,
vote your conscience.
yeah,
That seems
vote
like
your
a
conscience,
ridiculous thing to say.
vote your country, vote something like it was a whole
No,
slogan
it's
conceived
that's
in there.
silly. That's silly. What politician in the last 100 years has been worth the weight of your conscience? Who could be
Uh,
a representative of your
There've been
conscience?
so many, not your exact conscience, but you'd be like, I'd be okay with this person taking care of my
Oh, I
kids or
mean,
something like
yeah,
that.
I mean your
But like,
conscience, right? No,
yeah,
there are no representatives out there who I would
but
entrust my conscience with.
but
I hate
here's the
all of
thing
them for
though.
various reasons, and so vote your
That's yeah. Okay,
conscience.
obviously you entrust yourself to yourself. That's your mentality. But like when it comes to government, like first of all, we got to define what government is for. Like, why is it there? Why do we need our governments? Can we do stuff ourselves? And the answer is we can't do it ourselves.
Well, the
We
government
need
is
like
ourselves,
we need representatives. Yeah, right. The government is like made up of representatives.
right? It's
So
us.
this is an
It's
American context, huh?
when we build a highway. I don't build a highway. My city doesn't build a highway. My neighbors don't build it. We all have to build a highway. And so how do
Right.
we do that? We need taxpayer government money that the government collects and distributes. The government is us building a highway. When I
The
want to build a
government is
highway,
us,
it's the
but it's also
government.
not us. It's like, it's like the people who pick up the garbage. Like America is so blessed, amazingly. Like that's why when I see people saying, "Oh, we want civil war," I'm like, "Do you know what you're asking for?" Because civil war just means the government just stops doing the stuff that you kind of take for granted. Um, and so when it comes to the role of government, the government is like a force that is meant to stop evil first, and then the second is to like ensure that things that regular citizens perhaps could not get done as a collective. So like it's not like my neighbors and I are like we're just let's go to uh we could do it, right? I see people doing it all the time. Be like, well, let's go to the beach and clean up for a while, right? On a Saturday morning. Like that's not something perhaps we're inclined to do because we have jobs and all these other
Right.
things.
But
But the government has a mandate to protect its citizens and to ensure that the infrastructure runs smoothly. Uh, those are the primary two roles of government.
right. And
Once
I
we
just
go into, sorry.
no, go ahead.
No. So once we go past those two things, stopping evil and enhancing infrastructure, we get into social issues. That's where it gets tricky because not every single person is going to have the right, or rather the same uh, understanding of what society should look like, or what day-to-day life should look like, or what morality is. So in a sense, the government now takes on a third role of enforcing morality. And the question is, whose morality gets enforced? Because it's not like we're following the morality of Muhammad, right? So it's not like we're Saudi Arabia. There's a morality that Americans have that people in other parts of the world don't have. And that's important to know that. Yeah. Well,
Right.
you were
So,
saying something, but
yeah,
yeah.
no, I agree with every bit of that except for the very first thing, which you said once and didn't repeat, which is that the government's role is to uh, what was it? Protect us from evil or something.
Stop
There was
stop
stop
to
evil, something.
prevent evil.
Yeah, prevent
Yes.
evil. I don't believe that that's any part of the government's role. I do believe that everything else that you said is though, and I abstract that out to saying that's us acting out those things. So, for instance, national protection. me with a gun is not national protection, right?
That's right.
We
Yeah,
need a tank, right? And you and I can't buy a tank, and so our government can buy a tank, but they're buying a tank as a kind of a heuristic for me and you buying a tank. That's what it's for. So we
protecting us
can
from evil.
protect, right? Well, we're protecting, we're being protected from uh, human
Human evil.
encroachment. I mean, look,
All right.
you
Yeah,
can use
just
that if
say it.
you're a Christian. You can say anything you want to, but it's
No, that's
I would
what it
say
means because
I would
I
say
don't want
protection, and you would say protection from evil. I'm trying to find as much agreement as we
you,
can
you
because I'm about to throw open the doors to some madness here.
the guest. All right,
Yeah,
bring in the guest too.
so I do think that's uh correct. The government is there to do things that we can't do, and it gets really, really dicey when the government becomes a representative of and an advocate for religion uh, and specific morality. There's room for people and organizations to do religion. We don't need the government to do religion.
Exactly.
We
So
need the
yeah,
government to the extent possible to get out of the way of it, secular government, and get out of the way of all kinds of things. But they don't. The government itself is not represented by the cross; it's represented by the flag. And
and yeah,
people bearing the flag can be represented by the cross or by whatever the Islam symbol is, or whatever the satanic symbol is, or whatever. That's fine, but that's not the government. That is separate and apart from the government. And to the extent possible, uh, we as individuals have the ability to set our own moral understandings and such. And the government only gets involved with that to the extent that one person's freedom has to stop at the other person's nose. You. So we have to regulate so that freedom doesn't become tyranny with one group over another. That's the
yeah,
only extent
but
to which government should be involved in such things.
like in terms of government being involved in religion, that's what the founding fathers had, and like ironically enough, they got that from the Bible that the church answers to God and the state answers to God, but the state doesn't do the stuff that the church does, and the church doesn't do the stuff that the state does, because that's what was happening in Europe, where you have a state church, church state, um, where you have the Pope telling people you got to do government stuff. Like imagine like if that was happening today, everyone would be so miserable. Um, but the people who founded America, they recognized that for 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 the state to be able to do its thing, church and state have to be separate. And that doesn't mean that you eliminate God. It just means that the state has responsibilities that tie it to God, and the church has responsibilities that also tie it to God, and the two should be kept separate. So it's not that the church is meddling in so that it's in the state's affairs.
Right. I
Although
don't. I
that's
don't want
different
the
when it comes
state.
to social things.
Yeah, I don't want the state eradicating religion. Okay, let me just be
Right.
clear about that. I don't want that. That's my job, and I can do it just fine. Thank
Well,
you.
I can
I
do
don't.
that.
I don't need the state's help
Oh no.
to do that.
But
So
here's the bad news for you. Like historically, well, bad news for me as a Christian is that historically, when the state becomes secular to a degree, then the next logical step for them is to say, well, we don't need this Christian
right,
stuff. All right.
and bad news for me is historically when the state becomes religious, uh, then uh,
Well, when the state
any
becomes religious,
anti-religious thought is stamped
no,
out, and
no,
so
when the state becomes religious, everyone suffers, like every single person except the people on the top.
yeah,
So
I would argue that
it's not
Rome
just
did not help.
atheists.
Rome taking on Christianity as a state religion uh,
Oh, they ruined Christianity,
was the
and like
ruination of Christianity.
they ruined Christians. So
I
they were
believe that strongly. But it
David,
is what it is.
you
Okay,
said
look,
it's okay. You said it's okay if I jump in. I just have a
It
couple
is. It is.
questions.
I'm gonna throw it open to
Yeah, we're
anyone on
gonna
the
throw it over
panel,
to you
and
guys.
I do want to say though that when we come back around for the end, I do want to get into the topic, assuming there's time, of overthrowing governments and when
Mhm.
and
When it's
if,
okay to do that.
yeah, a government, and when, if, and how governments should be overturned. But for now, we're going to swing open the doors to anyone with a microphone to have at it.
Hey, okay. So yeah. So I was gonna frame this as questions for you guys, and I guess I'll just uh yeah, I'll still phrase it as questions for the panel, but I'll give my take as well then, since this is what we're doing. So okay, so two things here. So there's the first I guess I'll start with the secularism thing, because that's what you guys were just talking about. So in Canada, we have a specific example of this separation of church and state type deal, where in Quebec they have a different legal standard, right? So we have these charters of free rights and freedoms. So section 2A gives us freedom of religion to practice our religion. And basically, it just prevents the government from enforcing uh, one religion over another, right? Christian nationalism, I think all of us are against. I don't want the government imposing and enforcing Christianity or death on unbelievers. I don't want fakes in the church. I want everyone who is a Christian to be a true Christian, because otherwise, what's the point? You can go to church, but you're not saved. So the state has no business trying to spread the Christian religion, and that sort of thing. However, some governments have felt the need to say, well, in certain contexts, for example, government employees in Quebec, they can't even express the religion. If you're a Sikh, you can't wear your turban. That's illegal, because that's showing a government supporting the religion. Or if you can't even wear a cross, or whatever you need to do. This, I think, is ridiculous. This is where secularism becomes ridiculous. No, we are a government of the people. The government represents people of all the faiths. A Sikh can wear a turban, a Christian can wear a cross as a government employee. That's not the government supporting those religions. It's supporting the community that have varying faiths. We represent people of different faiths, and they can freely express those faiths. So I think that example is the government going too far into secularism. Um, so yeah, David, should I open it up? How should I do this? Because I have two issues I want to ask. Should I raise the two issues?
I think that anyone can just speak. So I'm not interested in moderating this next few minutes. And in the spirit of that, you're wrong. So I think there's a such thing as a uniform code. There's a reason why the militaries have uniform codes. Uh, there's reasons why fast food restaurants have uniform codes. Uniforms have a purpose, and they are there for a reason. And without going into all of the reasons, I will just focus on the one that says when you are working for us, then you wear this uniform, which represents this thing and nothing else.
But that's not
And so,
true. Even in the military, we've got pictures of Sikhs wearing their turbans. There's religious
I,
accommodation in the
I
military.
agree that the uniform code has been compromised in many ways in many places, but I am taking you back to the original intent and idea
Okay,
behind a uniform code. And the reason that it has become compromised is because, I think, of religion. Because, for instance, if there was a, I don't know, a white supremacy um, uh, banner or logo or symbol,
or a black
back,
supremacy one. Yeah.
or a black supremacy one during the time when the uniform codes matter, there's no way in hell that anyone would have been allowed to wear that while wearing their military uniform or while representing the government in some official capacity. It's simply not. It was never going to happen. It took religion to do that. And so I do believe that religion, they understood exactly what the uniform code was, and they wanted to subvert it. and that's what we have. And so and by the way, I felt like this when I was a Christian too. Uh, I don't. If you go to work for the government, that's not a that's not a time for proselytizing. And the only reason Christians wear crosses is to announce, I'm a Christian, to everybody. And actually, what you're doing, especially if you're in a public facing government job, is you're announcing, I'm the government. You're not
Well, actually,
announcing,
can I jump in real quick? I'm sorry. The
yeah,
reason people wear crosses, it's because it's a cultural symbol. Like these days, it's not because you're a Christian. It's just because it looks cool. Rappers, whatever, basketball players, everyone's just wearing a cross. You're
don't
like,
get me
are you a
started on
Christian?
rappers.
No, I
Okay,
believe in God.
I
That's it.
agree with
Yeah,
that. I'm
yeah,
just saying that the
yeah.
idea is a subversion of the uniform code, and it was an intentional subversion, and we have it now. And so I fully agree that that exists. But what also is true is we no longer have a uniform code. And therefore, it is very, very difficult to tell when someone is acting as a representative of the government or a representative of their faith. Because when a gay couple comes to a clerk to marry and have the clerk sign the papers, the clerk might be a government employee or they might be a Christian. And if they are wearing the uniform of a Christian, they say, no, I'm not going to do it because I disagree with it. And so there's very good reason why uniform codes matter and why the spirit of uniform codes matter.
So I
Being
have
enforced.
two. Oh, Mac. I,
No, no, go ahead, go ahead. I
yeah, so I have two responses, and then I'll get Mac's opinion, and then I'll ask my second question, and unless anyone else in the peanut gallery wants to come up. Okay,
maybe.
so David, two responses. So number one, look, I agree with you. Look, history has proven this is what happened to the ancient Roman Empire. They were a less cohesive army. Why? Because they accommodated and appeased the barbarians. They weren't wearing Roman armor and stuff like that. They were wearing their barbarian trousers. Who the heck would want to wear pants compared to a skirt, right? But and same with the British in India. They appeased the Indians, let them wear their traditional mock-ups, and wouldn't you know it, there was no cohesion of the army. However, this religious accommodation is not, they have uniforms. They were wearing the standard uniform. There's enough assimilation, but just wearing a cross is not enough to distinguish it, or putting on a turban. These things are fundamental and essential, or as the law says, bona fide religious accommodations that can be made without causing the problems of no cohesion among the people. The second thing is with the governments.
Just before you get away from that, they can wear a cross now. They could have worn a cross all along under their uniform with their dog tags.
Not in Quebec.
Well, okay,
That's
but I'm just saying this never had to be an issue. If what Christians thought was so important that they wear a cross, they could have worn a cross underneath their uniform. That wasn't the point. The point was to display the cross, not merely to have it on your person. People don't even display their dog tags. This is why this is all about demonstration. It has absolutely nothing to do with the right to be a Christian in a government position.
okay. And that's my second point is, well, what, this isn't the military. What is the point? This is representing the government, and the government is the representative of the people of various religious faiths. So it's the government's job to show, yes, we've got Christians, yes, we've got Sikhs, we represent Muslims, that you should be advertising
Except
within
when those
reason.
Christians say that I'm not going to ratify your gay marriage, that is legal, and the judge
But
has
yeah,
signed.
right.
Right.
So they don't have the right to do that, right?
Except they
Or there
kind of
should be,
do.
or there should be accommodation. Sorry, like the government's role is to allow for gay marriages and stuff like
Right.
that. So if you have a,
There should not be accommodation. You either work for the government or you do not. You
no,
don't
there can
work
be
for the
accommodations, right?
no. Well, then you don't
Why
work for the
not?
government. You're just
What,
drawing a paycheck from the government. The government is the one that defines the job. All right. So if you get a job as a mortician, but your religion says you can't touch dead bodies, you got the wrong job, buddy. There is no accommodation for your religion. It's the job is mortician. And in this case, the job is government. And the government
yeah.
ratifies gay marriage. You don't get a choice to make the law based on your preferences. You
No,
got the wrong
but you
job.
can, because the
Go be a
government
preschool teacher.
do you know how legally the religious accommodations work? So, for example, I agree with you, and we've had cases in this, right? A Sikh can't wear their turban if they're a construction worker. You have to wear a hard hat. That's an essential non-thing. We can't compromise or accommodate religion in that front. With the gay marriages, there can be accommodation because there are multiple employees, right? So you can have someone who doesn't have a religious disqualification.
I would
Now,
say that
if the
inherently
government
those accommodations are
don't
wrong.
interrupt though. One last thing, and then the last thing I wanted to say. Now there will be cases where it does call the legal term is undue hardship, right? So let's say we're in a small town and the government can't afford multiple employees. Well, then okay, then I would agree with you where we say, look, the government has to be able to marry gays. If you can't do that within your conscience, then we can't hire you and accommodate you without undue hardship. And that's where the law says no, the government, then we don't hire Christians, we don't hire Muslims. But if you can accommodate them without undue hardship, I think we should. I'll shut up.
You're missing the inherent discrimination in that. If you're a gay person and you go to a window to get your paper stamped by a clerk, and they say, "Yeah, I'm not going to do it because I'm a Christian and I don't believe that you should be married," you have immediately, upon that moment, done emotional harm. Furthermore, you send them in another line and waste some more of their day, and hopefully, maybe they find someone there within a given time because they've got to go to their honeymoon or whatever, to then ratify them. This is officially the state telling a couple your marriage is sinful. The state cannot do that, should not be able to do that under any circumstances for any reason at any time.
Yeah, that's what makes the state the state. So the state is a necessary institution to keep Christians from having to say. So again, Dale, it's separation of church and state. So it's not like the church, the state can go around baptizing people. If you saw the state doing that, you'd be, hold on a minute, what are you doing? That's not your job. In the
Right.
same way, it's not the job of the church to be like, let's legislate, like not legislate, well, let's legislate, let's enforce morality. So if I'm a clerk and I work at whatever the marriage booth, whatever it's called, where people get their marriage certificate stamped, and this couple comes up to me and they're like, "Can you stamp our stuff?" I work for the government, even though the government is inherently going to be sinful because it's made up of sinners. I have to stamp that thing knowing in my heart that I am not approving of that stuff. But I have to do my job because I work for the state and the state is under God. And when the state is brought to judgment before God, I won't be judged with them because I'm not the person who made the law that says da 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 da. We have to get all kinds of people, whatever, uh, in marriage unions. That's not something that's like not um your battle to fight. And in a sense, um, if your conscience is like, oh wow, my conscience is gonna rile me up, it's gonna put me in this tough position, then you most likely should not be working in a place where you're going to be stamping uh marriage certificates because you could be stamping all kinds of weird marriages. You could be stamping abusive relationships. You could be approving of incestuous if you're not aware. You could be like all kinds of things that go against your Christian ethics. And so if your conscience is that sensitive, then you should not be in such a setting at
Well,
all.
Well, Mac, so I disagree with you, right? Because again, you're just answering strictly from a Christian perspective. I actually, as a Christian, if I was working as a government thing, and it's just my job to certify yes by stamping it, I don't have a moral problem with doing that myself as a Christian.
I do.
But the point is, there are other religions that might, and we have to ask the question of does the government have to accommodate those, and to what extent? And I think that the government there are easy workarounds to the problems that whereby we can accommodate a bona fide religious belief
No,
without
I don't think so because then
compromise.
it becomes a question of favoritism. Oh, go ahead. You want to finish?
Oh yeah.
Right. Well,
But it's not, we're still servicing. We don't have to tell the people, oh, I'm a Muslim. I can't stamp your pitiful little, like, no one has to tell. We have ways to accommodate and still do the job, and the people will be serviced exactly the same as though the
No,
religious accommodation's not in place. So
it's not exactly the same when someone
not.
turns them away, right? I
If
mean, even
someone
if they,
turns you away, it's like
but they
the whole
won't turn you away. They won't
it's
turn you
like
away.
okay, it'd be like
Aren't
it'll be
listening to
like a silent you're like, oh, why is this person walking away? Where is someone else coming to
no,
serve me?
but
It's like
the
if you
gays
go
get married. The gay guys get married. The government does its job,
okay, you
right? If
remember Miss Davis? I think Davis was the last name. It simply wasn't the case that the job was done. The
well,
people
that's
were
wrong then.
they were
That's where it's
literally
wrong.
turned away. But what you seem to be favoring, Dale, is not a government without religion, but a government with every religion,
all
an
the religions.
omni religion government as opposed to a secular government. Those are not the same things. A secular government uh, can uh, can do its job without reference to religion, but an omni-religious government has to do its job with reference to every religion, and so it is it is a government that is not monotheistic. It is
It's a polytheistic
it's a
government.
very polytheistic government, and
It's
Yeah.
weird. You guys don't know the government is working the way I say it. Like, this is how it's actually working today in the
Well,
US
it's
and
wrong.
Canada.
If
So
it's
like,
working that
yeah,
way, it's
that's
definitely deficient
that's my objection. So I agree
because
with you. That's
wow.
exactly how it's working today.
So put it this
I
way. I
agree with
think that here's my position, and I'll just state it this way, right? Like, the government performs its job for the citizens, regardless of religious accommodation, right? Because if it can't perform the jobs that it's supposed to do because of someone's religious beliefs, then that's undue hardship, and we shouldn't allow it, right? The person at the clerk who turned the gay couple away and they didn't get their marriage certificate, that was wrong. They should have gotten their certificate. And if there was a way to accommodate that person's religious belief by having someone else serve them and give them that document and stamp, that's what should have been done. That's the way the law works. I mean, there's a famous case about a school, right? There was a Muslim kid, a university student who refused to work with females. They couldn't be in a group with females, and the university decided, great, we're going to accommodate that, right? We can put you in a group with all men. That there's no undue hardship. We can still do the project and the education content and stuff like that. Now, what would happen in the case? Let's say he's in, I don't know what's an all female thing. He's in HR, or he's in fashion design or something, and let's say the entire class is a bunch of females. Okay, well, in that case, that would create undue hardship. The university would say, you have to work with females. We can't accommodate you. You know, it's up to you. You can leave the school and fail the project or not. But
I'm
that there's
I'm
that balancing act is
I'm
what
going
I'm
to
trying.
try this one more time, and I'll hand it over to Darren because I know he has
yeah.
things to say.
Wait,
Um,
David, before you do it, like two
sure,
minutes to chime in on this issue.
sure.
I don't think I love being American because in America there's not the stuff that I read about that's happening, for example, in Europe. I think you did a show about this, about like, they were trying to build like a railroad, and then a synagogue or a group of Jews were like,
Yes.
no, that's gonna violate our whatever, our ideas, or it's gonna make us feel bad, or something of those lines. And the
Yeah,
whole thing
they
is like
couldn't
when you're
run.
trying
They couldn't
was
go under a morgue or something like that. There was a
Yeah, because
morgue
of
there.
some belief system that they have about that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like the government is like, it's our job to build railroads. Can you just let us do it? Like, nope, it's gonna violate. So the thing is this, when it comes to a secular state, which by the way, I am totally for because that's what the Bible teaches. But the state isn't autonomous, it's under God. And so the thing with the secular state is that you can't have all these accommodations because in the end of the day, first of all, you create a system where nothing gets done because someone out there is always gonna have a problem with like, oh, I don't eat pork on Thursdays, or I don't like watching TV on Tuesdays, and it's like, so I can't do my job. So not like the job is done less efficiently because every single person has their like you spend more time debating preferences instead of people like just doing their job. And then secondly, it's like a secular government cannot have itself be influenced even by Christianity to be like, okay, let's make the Christians happy or let's make the Muslims happy. Once it starts doing that, then it ceases to be a secular government. It becomes that religion that it's trying to make happy, or it's making every religion happy, and then it's not a secular state anymore.
Just one
Yeah,
smart aleck comment, and then I'll go to Darren. And I remember I have a second question that I think is really important, but and yet the government is accommodating people in exactly the way I'm arguing for, and we don't have any of the consequences that your action. We do get the job
Actually,
done
we
of a
do.
secular
We
state, so
we
there's no
do.
problem
There
in
is a
reality.
problem, and that's the comment that I want to leave with as I hand it over to Darren, which is you're forgetting all about uh, issues of civil rights here and justice. Accommodation, as you're describing it, is not the same as equality. It's simply not the same. So if you are a gay couple getting your paper stamped, if any part of that process says, hold on, I'm going to have to go get someone else to accommodate you, whereas everyone else in line is going through and getting stamped, you have been treated unequally. At that very moment, you have been treated unequally by the state. Accommodation is not equality. And what people are fighting for is equality. And what religious accommodation does is it says, we won't be entirely equal if your religion means that we can't treat that person equal. We will find someone else to do it and we will accommodate. That means that someone else might have to wait at a courthouse for an extra hour. I, as a person of color, and every person of color can attest to this, have been in many restaurant situations in my lifetime where we got there. The wait should have been no more than 5 or 10 minutes. Other people came through, no reservation system, and they were seated, and we're waiting an hour plus before we can get a seat. Now, you could argue, well, a lot of those people in there were racist and wouldn't have felt comfortable sitting, with a mixed couple right there. And so we accommodated you by waiting until the restaurant thinned out, and we got a seat. You got a seat, didn't you? You see, you were accommodated. No, I was discriminated against, and I will never have a word of thanks for that form of accommodation. That is inherently discriminatory.
yeah, it's like it's the separate fountains thing. When you think about it, it's kind of crazy, but that was what the government was like. That was their solution to people just being like, "Oh, I'm so racist,"
Right.
and
I
it's
mean,
like,
you got the
and it
Christian
was
line, and then you got the line, with the one guy
or
in the corner who does the
yeah,
gay
you know
marriage.
something funny is that it that still happens today in like Islamic countries. You have the Muslim line and the non-Muslim line. So I guess you could see that happen in practice if you go to Saudi Arabia, like where if you're a Muslim, you get treated better than if you're not a Muslim. And it's like if you're like, what is this? You know? Um, and so I am thankful that I live in a state in a country where that stuff doesn't happen visibly because it could, but
Okay.
it's not that like it's called, oh, we're just being accommodating. And it's like, no, it's you're not being equal under the law. You're treating people in classes and that's not the job of the government. It should never be like that ever, 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 ever. And so
Let's
when the
give it to
government
Darren.
starts doing that, yeah.
Let's
This
yeah, Dale.
All right, let him talk. Let him
Let's
talk.
give it
Yeah.
to Darren. Darren, this is your moment to shine, brother.
Oh, I'm gonna screw that up then. I don't know. Sorry, Dale. I have to agree with Mac and David on this one. Um, but I also, and I know I'm gonna insult all our Christian people here, but I don't really care about religious quote unquote feelings. I think they're stupid. I think they're just made up, and I think they are so far from reality that they should be ignored. Um, that being said, I think religious accommodation is I, the problem is that Christians don't actually want religious accommodation. They want Christian accommodation. And you can see this all over the place. I think there was a school board at one point that was doing some religious accommodation thing. And then as soon as the Satanists came up and said, oh, I want you guys to vote for this because that means the Satanists can go ahead and take advantage of this too, the whole idea got scrapped because they didn't want religious accommodation. They wanted Christian accommodation. And a lot of Christian accommodation means discriminating and bullying gays and anyone else they don't like. And because people are pushing back against that, the Christians think they're being persecuted against.
So
And
just to steel man that a little bit, Darren, you don't have to go to Satanists for that sort of thing. In those places where, say, there's like prayer allowed at a school board meeting or something like that, and they're like, oh no, we just want to accommodate people. In almost every one of those cases that I've been able to find further data on, there is never an imam praying at those meetings or a Jewish rabbi praying at those meetings. It's always a Christian praying at those meetings. And when they have been forced, and they have always had to be forced to allow others to pray who wanted to, someone would always get up after that, a Christian, and then cover it with a Christian prayer, to wipe out the stench of that Islamic prayer. So I just wanted to throw that in, because that's a part of the news stories when I read. I often don't cover that aspect of it, but it's there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's all over the place. Funneling money to Christian schools from public schools with vouchers. I mean, it isn't like Christians are trying to be trying for accommodation because they want everyone to be equal. What they want is for the secular government to become a theocracy, and so they're trying everything they can to funnel money to Christianity. And I don't think that should be the case. We're not a Christian nation. We're a secular nation. And as soon as you start, quote unquote, accommodating Christians, they start pushing more and more and more until they get the theocracy they're after. And so the best way to prevent that is just to not accommodate at all. No religious accommodation whatsoever.
And then everyone
And in the
dies in
same
bloodshed,
vein,
right? Oh, go ahead.
But everyone
Well,
doesn't have to die in
Christians
bloodshed.
are going to throw a tantrum and start killing
No.
people because they don't want to be
Because
we don't want to
kill
accommodate them.
anyone.
That's the reason we have religious rights, right? It's coming from the context of being in England, where everybody persecutes each other. Christians on Christians, slaughtering each other. Oh, you're an Anabaptist? Fine, I'm going to kill you. All the religious wars. This is why we created these religious accommodations. These are the most. You may not care about religious rights, but we do.
It's not about religious rights.
You're saying that Christians are so volatile that if they
It's not
don't
even
get
about
to have their
Christians,
way,
Muslims.
okay,
Muslims
and so
are.
religionists are so volatile that if they don't have their way, they're going to destroy society. Is that your argument for Christian
Yeah, because
for
that's
accommodation?
what happened in human history. That's
No.
the reason
Wow.
we created the concept.
Which is another
wait.
reason why we shouldn't be accommodating
No, it's another
religion.
reason why we
If
should.
they're going to throw a
this is
tantrum
getting-
and start shooting people, then they don't deserve a place at the table.
Of course they do. Of course they do. Yeah, I mean that's just
Hold
stupid.
on a second.
That's like saying we can discriminate. Look,
Here,
it's
let's
not about
let's throw it
equality.
to Mac as the voice of reason. I never
No.
I never thought I
So
would
you
say.
guys are all okay. I'm leaving.
No, we're not against you. That's just a wild take. That what you just said
This
is something
what the
I've
government
not
is
heard.
doing. I'm
You're-
right. You're wrong. This is what
Okay,
happens
you're
today.
saying, but
The
what
Trudeau
I
government,
heard,
the Biden-
what I heard you say,
There's no
Dale,
problems. There's no
is
two
if
lines.
Christians,
The gays aren't in a separate line, segregated. They're in the same damn line.
if
And if
you're
I
saying,
can't do
if,
it, I just go over and get my colleague to take over and do the thing. This is how
if
it works.
religionists aren't accommodated, then there will be bloodshed. Is what I just heard you say.
Aren't accommodated. If the gays aren't accommodated, there's bloodshed. Right?
Really?
This is proven in history. We see them, and in practice, it's only the Christians.
Those
that are
great
ever
gay
discriminated.
armies that marched when Anyway, Mac, you were
Hold
go,
on,
go
wait.
ahead, Mac.
David, I resent that you say that I'm the voice of reason, but you don't really mean it.
No,
Like,
actually, in this case, I kind of mean it.
all right. Well,
kind of mean
here's
it.
here's the thing. All right, responding to what Darren said is like, all right, whatever. Don't care about religion. It's dumb. It's stupid. Um, all right. You have the right to have that belief, right? Um, but there's a problem here because that's not being applied across the board. And I brought this up a few months ago now that the mayor of New York was for a few months there because he's so busy these days. For a while there, he was pushing New Ageism and Buddhism in public schools. Now, atheists caught wind of this, but the response that the atheists caught like gave wasn't the response that would have happened if the mayor was pushing Christianity. So he was pushing a religion for sure. Like there's no doubt about it. He was saying, okay, kids, every 10 minutes you gotta stop what you're doing and you gotta do Buddhism meditation. And he was putting this in the education system. All of this is public record. You can look it up.
What
And
was he
so
saying?
when
Buddhism meditation or just meditation?
no, he was saying meditation, and then he had an Earth Day thing. He had a day of yoga or something, and he gave a whole speech about how Buddhism centers us and makes us all better people who love each other. Blah blah blah. The
Well,
point
did
is
he
this:
say Buddhism
he
or did he
was
just say yoga?
he did say Buddhism. I posted the video on. I think I sent it to Sarah, and she was like, "Yep, that's right." I
Okay,
can
well,
post it in
in
the
that
in the
case, because
comment
I
section.
never saw that, Mac. But if that's the case, I would
Yeah, but here's the
I'm with
thing.
you. I would be against that.
Right,
Yeah, me
right.
too.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. I'm okay with you guys being against it, but the thing is, this is the mayor of the biggest city in America, and it never got any airplay. Like it never made the news in terms of like national news. But if the guy was pushing Christianity and saying stuff about, let's say the Lord's Prayer or something, then every single news outlet out there will be like, stop putting religion in our government. And the
Yeah.
problem is that it's not that Christians are seeking for Uber rights. It's more like we're saying, hey, why is it that that guy who's like a public figure and the biggest uh, mayor in the country, why is he going to do stuff like that and not face any repercussions?
Okay, but
And
in all
you're
fairness, Mac,
trying
I didn't
to
hear
silence them.
it from Christians either because as you know, I troll Christian news sites every day, multiple times a day. I never saw that story in a Christian news
Yeah,
site.
because Christians don't care in a
Because
bad way.
I
If
would have done the story and I would have been in favor of the Christian position in that at that point.
right,
So I
right,
it's not because I wasn't diligent, or I just look at Christian sources for my stories, and it wasn't there.
right. And I look at the atheist sites and see what are atheists talking about these days. And I saw it there. That's where I saw it. I was like, oh, that's interesting. But no one was upset about it on the scale of like how I see people get upset about what some weird school board is trying to do in
Well,
Kentucky, whatever.
that's because Christianity has been trying to subvert our secular government for
Well,
decades.
everyone is trying to subvert it in different ways. And that's
Okay,
that's the issue
but
because you
not
can't say,
religiously. You don't have a real infusion of Buddhism into
"Mm,
the schools. But
yes, you do."
if this is a case of that, I'm with that. I'm incensed over that.
Are you
So
really?
yes, I am really. I'm a secularist.
You really?
I
Okay.
don't now.
I'm sorry,
Granted,
Sen.
if I am
You
incensed, I I am incensed. Look, I don't know how to explain it because this is the first time that I have heard this nuance about that story.
Okay,
Uh,
there are retweets of the discussion I had with Sarah on the board, and I posted like screen caps and videos of the mayor doing this, and also posted an article to an atheist website where the atheists were like, "Well, you can't do stuff like that. If it's no religion at all, that means there's no Buddhism either,
well,
and
so
no New
I
Age
didn't
stuff."
see that. I didn't see that in
Okay,
your post or your arguments. What I
okay,
was hearing you saying was that that uh, yoga is fundamentally religious, and that's all I was arguing against. No, in America it isn't. But if what you're saying is yoga is being instituted as a form of Buddhism in a school, you would have gotten a different reaction from me. You would have gotten this reaction from me because, first of all, I'm no fan of Mayor Adams. I'm not an Adamite. Screw that guy. Uh, Secondly, New York City is a very interesting city that I love, but have no loyalty to whatsoever. They are screwed up in so many ways.
Yes, and
Right,
I
right,
so
and
happen
left.
to live here. But the
Yeah,
thing is, like living in a place like this, again, you're in a sense, I feel like I'm just so exposed to so much of what the world in general has to offer.
right.
And if we were to have the government accommodate all these different nationalities, maybe that's why we're not getting stuff done recently. It's because if we accommodate someone from Pakistan, people from India, people from South America, we accommodate all these consciences, then we can't get anything done. And what the mayor has been doing, he's been doing that. He's been trying to make everyone happy. And at some point, you're like, no, you can't make everyone happy. At some point, you
Yeah.
just gotta do
At some
the
point, you got to
job.
be a state, right? You got to be a
Yes, be a
secular
state,
state,
be a
and
state.
that's all that I am asking for. It seems like that's all that you're asking for. And let the
That's
culture
all.
wars and religious wars be fought on at this level.
Yeah, but I
That's
gotta defend Dale's perspective because his perspective also is one that I used to have, where it's like, okay, we gotta protect religious rights. And I've left that position mainly because it's not something that I see in the Bible, which
Well,
is,
yeah,
of
but
course, or what I'm always going to go to, but also because it's not practical in terms of what the state is supposed to do. The state's job isn't to make my feelings happy. The state's job, like that could be a byproduct of what they do, right? But their job is to get the job done that they've been given, mainly
well,
by
the
God
states.
and then also by the citizens.
right.
What's
And I
that?
Well,
have my rights don't come from my religious rights when I was a religionist didn't come from government. In other words,
They came from God.
I didn't have freedom of religion because the government gave it to me. I had it because I thought God gave it to me, and if the government tried to take it away, I would have still acted as if I had it. So I didn't care what the government said about my rights. For as far as my religion goes, they have nothing. They have no insight into my religious rights.
well, I think the problem is that religious rights, when they're talked about in the U.S., mean bullying of other people. So the religious don't have a right to bully other people, and that's what the state's trying to solve. But the problem is that the religious people think they have the right to bully other people, and when they're stopped from doing that, then they start saying that they're being persecuted against and being discriminated against.
Okay,
That's the problem. The state is there to protect everyone, not just Christians.
hard
And
stop. We got two
Yeah,
things. We got two things left to go. One of them is Dale's second question, and the other is 5 really loud minutes of talking about overthrowing governments. Dale, what was your second question? I have not forgotten about it.
Okay. So yeah, one very quick thing. I'll just say on this, I'm not the crazy one. Everyone here is the crazy one. They're taking it in a context that I'm not talking. I'm on the same side as Justin Trudeau and the CBC. So like this isn't some conservative Christian thing. Okay, but let's leave that aside. What's my second question? So another major thing that I'm probably going to be overruled on by the majority here, but I don't care. I'm right. I think I'm right, so I'm going to argue for it. Is this distinction between moral support for a political candidate versus politically supporting? I think there is a fundamental difference, right? So I do not care at all as a political agent or citizen. My vote does not depend at all or extremely little in terms of a political candidate's private morality. I only care about morality when it speaks to how they implement a policy or how they do their job as a public servant. But Bill Clinton having an affair, let's say he had a consensual affair, forget about Monica Lewinsky, but he's a dog, right? So let's say he had a consensual affair with somebody who didn't work for him. There was no issues like or anything around that. I would not care. That would not affect. It didn't have any issue on his policies or him as a president. It would not affect my voting for Bill Clinton if I liked that guy. The
Agreed, but that
policies,
wasn't the problem with Bill Clinton. As you can't just say forget about Monica Lewinsky because that was a matter of violating uh,
but that's
law.
that's my point is I'm trying to draw this distinction, right? So okay, so Trump had an affair with Stormy Daniels. Don't give a good gosh darn. Couldn't care less. I'm not voting for a Christian preacher. I'm voting for a political president, and presidents can have affairs. They don't have to be Christians and stuff like that, right? So that's the point that I'm making here, right? Is that I only care about morality in the sense that it can be proven or is likely to affect how they do their job as the president.
We
So
used to, as a country, believe that a person's moral behavior was a leading indicator of the kind of person they were as a leader. Now we went through a point in time, and I don't know when that was. I think it was probably Bill Clinton, frankly, that made us start separating those two things out. But
Mm-hmm.
uh, before then, we in fact absolutely consider the moral character of a person as a part of their fitness for running a country. In fact, corporations, long after that, felt the same way about their corporate leaders. HP, they hired Mark Hurd, who was a very good um, CEO before the disaster of Leo Apotheker. Mark Hurd was unceremoniously uh, uh, shit canned by the board of HP because he had an affair that had nothing to do with the work. Uh, so that was in fairly recent times. I'm old, but all of us were alive at that time. Our corporations behaved that way. Our schools behaved that way. You couldn't have a principal, for instance, who was sleeping around, and our politicians. That was an expectation of our politicians. So I say it is a fairly recent and I think unfortunate turn that personal morality no longer is a factor in how we select our
Choose our
leaders.
leaders. Yeah,
okay,
I
great.
would
So
agree with you. Yeah.
you would
Go ahead.
agree. Great. So no one here can vote for Biden because he's a racist pig. He called
Great, then don't vote. Then
segregation.
don't vote.
He was against segregation. I said
That's
I don't
not
want my
that
kids
you're
going
not making
into a
you're not
racial
making a
jungle.
case that I'm not making. Then don't vote. If you think that if you
Cool. Cool. If
and
you support that Biden is an evil scumbag that you can't vote for, great. Great. Awesome.
I didn't say I agreed with it. I'm just saying the principle holds.
Well, you made that comment about racial jungles. How are you not offended by that, David? I'm offended for you. You're my friend as a black person.
I,
Calling you saying that you're from a
I am
racial
trying to
jungle is
stay
offensive.
I'm trying to stay focused on your original point and not let that slop over into many other subjects. Your What I am saying is I think I disagree with your original point that it doesn't matter what politicians do, and you can just look at this one narrow aspect of their life, which is how they do their jobs. And the way we used to determine how people do their jobs is by determining what kind of people they were. And I think that's a recent change. It's a change for the worse.
It's not a recent change. My position is then that's really, really stupid because we have historically had the greatest leaders in history who were really bad people on a private moral level, but did
The
really
public
great
didn't know
things.
how bad
Exactly. So
the
it
people
proves
were at
that
that time.
it
It,
proves that it's
they
irrelevant.
would not have been allowed to be leaders, and they would have elected other leaders who would have also been good. So this
Right.
idea that
Okay.
the only good choice is that bad guy over there is not. I think that's a false choice.
I
If you're
think
really voting morality and conscience and religious, conviction and fervor, what you do is you raise up leaders that are up to that task and description.
yeah, I
That
think
are
Dale's actually right on this one because
ah,
Republicans have been
Thank
one
you.
issue voters for a long time. They haven't cared really what the morality of their person is. It's been a long time since
and
Republicans have
that's
cared.
the problem that people are voting one issue, and it's a problem because when you say you don't care about the morality of the person you're voting for, it's not like once that person gets elected, then they become a good person. They take their morality and it seeps into the system. So it's like if we elect an immoral president, then he's gonna act immorally, and the thing is that it's crazy that people act so surprised like a president is acting immorally because that's who you chose. You held your nose and you said, I'm okay with this person being president. But the thing is, you knew he was a bad president. And so when what's happened in the newer generations, David is right. is that people have separated the character of the person from, like, they've made like people alter egos, and maybe it has to do with comic books or something, where it's like, oh, you're Superman by day, Clark Kent by night. But that's not how human beings work. Human beings are like, you can't, at some point you're the same person once you get elected. And the thing is that we saw with when Trump was elected is that he couldn't separate his tweeting from his presidential duties. He kept doing the same things when he was president. And this kind of just upset people even more and more and more and more and more. And the same thing with Joe Biden. He's been a career politician all his life. So it's not like he's gonna change. So it's not like he's gonna stop being a corrupt politician if we elect him for a fifth time or something. And so like
So
it's
you,
very
so Matt, you're
unfortunate
agreeing
that
with me then. You're
no,
agreeing
I'm
with me
not.
because I
I'm actually
said,
not. Huh? I'm saying let's not elect horrible people to office because it's like, well, I can
great,
separate
so
the
we can
two.
elect
No,
no one because everyone's a sinner.
no,
Everyone's a
you
horrible
can
person.
no, you can elect sinners who are not as bad as like the worst of two evils. So in the past you could elect good candidates like JFK, for instance, even though people are
JFK was
like, oh,
horrible, horrible.
right,
Do you
right,
know
he
how many
was like
sins that
horrible,
guy committed?
but
How many
here's the thing.
affairs?
But here's the thing. In terms of him being able to do his job and him being able to, in a sense, uh,
Funny
care for the
point.
country, he was a lot better than the options that we have today. And the problem is that today, again, people in like consciously, it's not even subconscious. People say, I know that person is a bad person. I can see they're a bad person, but I don't care. That's a problem when people say it. And it's a bigger problem when Christians say it because you're kind of saying that's okay with me too, for me. You're
Furthermore,
saying
I
it's
would say
okay.
that JFK indeed was a horrible person, but that at the time, in the moment, a lot of people
People
didn't know it. They didn't know
people
how
didn't even
horrible a
know
person
stuff.
he was.
Yeah,
So
people
that proves
even
my
even
point. It's
MLK,
irrelevant.
even
Right.
MLK Jr., right?
MLK at times in certain aspects of his life was a piece of shit.
Was
Um,
very an awful person, but we don't know these things till after the fact, which proves that everyone is a sinner.
exactly.
But the thing is this, it's not that you go pick the most random, unqualified person and you say, I'm gonna vote for that person because I don't care about their character. No.
Right.
You pick someone who's competent at their job and their record shows that they can do a good job. And if we find out there's skeletons later, then it's not that we picked them because of their skeletons, it's that we found out later. We can't,
Right.
we
Yeah,
can't
but
You can't
nobody's
unring a
picking.
bell. It,
Nobody's
Yes, you
picking.
can't
it,
unring a bell.
Nobody's picking
Say
these candidates for skeletons. That's the thing. We're picking them for policies. Do we believe?
no.
Do we have a reasonable belief? This is what I'm saying. We should be voting for. This is just my position. Do we have a reasonable belief, whether we know about their immorality or not in their private lives? Do we have a reasonable belief that they will perform their job in a good way, like
Dale,
according to you,
let me
JFK
just
did,
let me
and
throw
that I
this
think
question
Trump
back
did?
at you. Let me throw this question back at you, slightly rephrased. Would
Okay.
Jesus ever say something like, "Yeah, I know that person is a devil worshiper, and they throw babies in volcanoes, but he's a damn good administrator and is good for the Jewish people. I support that guy." Is that a Jesus thing to you?
Well, no, because that person's committing a crime, and therefore they're not a
Well, but
good leader.
you
They
didn't
should be
care
in
about
jail.
you're the one who made the comment. You didn't care what he did. He
No, but
could lose
I
your support. And I'm telling you, I'm trying to give that back at you in a
wait. Oh,
scenario where you've got, a
yes.
candidate who is a baby sacrificing devil worshiper, but is damn good for the Jews. Would Jesus say, "Yes, I support that guy because he would be good at his job"?
Okay, so let me answer without interruption here, okay? Because it's okay. Under a good society and good government that's functioning properly, where we have proper law and order, right? Then yes, that person shouldn't be voted for. Why? Because they're going to be in jail. That's the good for society. The fact that they're committing a crime of throwing babies into volcanoes is murder, and therefore they should be in jail. They can't run for president. They shouldn't even be a free person. That's how we uphold law and order for society. So, by definition, if we just let that person get away with murder and be the president, that's a lawless society of chaos. Now, my comment where I was obviously exaggerating, right? Because I mean, if Trump became like Joe Biden, I would not support him. Hey, I'm going to start supporting Democrat satanic policies, then I'm not voting for Trump. So I
You're
was
not
slightly
voting for
exaggerating,
anybody.
but I was trying to. Sorry.
You're not voting for anybody. You're in Canada.
Oh, well, yeah, I've got relatives in the US, so I'm going to be going after them to, I don't know. Anyways, you're right. Yeah, I'm not going to, but I'm just talking hypothetically. If I was in the US, I wouldn't vote for Trump. So obviously there are limits, right? But what I was trying to show you guys is how extreme it is, right? Trump's comment, he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue or something like that, because we are in a lawless society at this point where the Constitution is not followed. They just don't care about the laws. Look, with immigration alone, it's clear the laws on the books. It is Biden. He has to prevent and have
You
early
sidestepped my question
immigrants
though.
coming in.
I just
No,
want to say
I
I know I'm
answered you.
interrupting. No, you didn't. What you did was you reframed it and then you answered the question you wanted to answer. So I'm asking you the question in the sense that we are in the same kind of situation now, where you say that everything is lawless and that both candidates are lawless. And I'm asking you, would Jesus throw his support to a Satan worshiper? And what you said, what you did was reframe the question and say, well, if we were in more sane times, then we would uphold the law and that person wouldn't be on the books. That is
Okay,
not
so
answering the
let's
question.
let me rephrase it then, right? So we're in a lawless society. We're in a bad government, and let's say we have good old Joe Biden, who, on the other hand, he's not just throwing little babies in the volcano. He's also throwing everyone of every age, anyone who disagrees with him. They're all getting thrown in. So he's much worse than Trump, who's just throwing babies in.
Right.
And we
Fine.
also have the context of, at least by getting Trump in, sure, we're going to lose those babies, but we also have all these immeasurable goods because he's going to run the society good.
Granted,
Whereas Biden's running the
I will
society
grant you.
badly,
I'll grant
and
you
he's
all of that.
killing.
Does Jesus throw his
Then yeah,
support
I
for
would
that
vote for
guy?
Trump. I would vote for
I
Trump
didn't
in
ask
that
if you would.
circumstance.
I asked if you think Jesus would.
I think that Jesus would. He would support that rather than
Thank you.
it would be worse than having a bad society
I
where
think that
everyone's
you were
dying and
incorrect. I don't
everyone's.
think that Jesus would. I don't think that he would support either one. I do want to say hello to the one called Sal, who I don't know.
Hey,
Glad to
Sal.
see you. Um,
David,
I
can I just say one thing before Sal comes in? The lesser of two evils, God does support that in the Bible. Um, yeah.
Yeah, a discussion maybe for another week as our time is rapidly evaporated. However, that said, Sal, if uh, yeah, I'm crazy enough. I actually put the link, folks, on the Zoom link on the on 4S for anybody to pick up, and someone picked it up. So
Yeah, I
Sal,
think I've talked to Sal before.
okay, Sal, if you would like to unmute your mic and say things, you
Only if
have
he wants to, though.
you have
He
my opinion.
can't.
Right. No, look,
Yeah.
I'm famous for trying to pressure people into talk who won't talk because
So
they're
don't
smart enough
pressure
not
people.
to.
Don't pressure people into doing
What
things.
I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 5 seconds of silence, Sal, to decide if you want to unmute your mic and be on the show. Okay, that didn't work for Sal either. All right,
That
so
was 2 seconds.
that
Um,
was
but all right. Welcome, Sal.
welcome.
Yeah. So when it comes to man, so here's the thing. Love the United States of America. I think it's the best government system in the world. We're number one. I don't care what anyone says. I don't care what the Europeans say. I don't care what those people have to say. I think
We don't
America
have
is
red
number,
cream soda, Mac. So Canada.
but we're number one because precisely because we are the government system that follows as closely as we can the mandate about uh, the church and the state being separate. And so when it comes to picking leaders, we have gone down the wrong road for the past few years. We've just like Christians have fumbled the ball. That's it. And it's the question is how are we going to unfumble? How are you going to recover it? How are you going to get it back? Because it's now in either it's in the middle of the field or the opposition is on its way to get the ball. And the thing is, how are we gonna write ourselves out of this pit we've put ourselves into, where we're always picking against the lesser of two evils? Now, Trump is a Manhattan guy. He's not he's not a conservative by any stretch of the imagination. He only ran as a Republican because the Democrat Party, ironically enough, said no to him.
Right?
And the
Wasn't he a
thing,
Democrat at first? Didn't he?
right, right. And so he ran as a Republican. And though the support for him has been, and his popularity surprised everyone. That's why when he won in 2016, everyone was like, "What just happened?" All the pundits, all the pollsters are saying Hillary's gonna go. She's gonna walk this thing. This guy is too immoral to win, and the guy won. And when that happened, a shift happened in the political system. And the thing is, okay, I'm reading the chat. He says, okay, it was very good stuff. One of the best presidents of all time. Okay, in terms of the economy, and that's what people. That's what I wanted to tell you, David, that Americans, for the most part, they'll say all social issues, da 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 da. But what people care about the most is their money
I was going
and
to
how
make
much
that comment
how
earlier. Yeah.
the economy, right? So people have all these other issues like like social issues, and but if the economy is doing well, then everyone is buddies and friends. But if gas goes up by $1,
Yep. The
then we all hate.
Republicans, they talk about
Then it's
abortion. Turns out Trump is not as anti-abortion as they want him to be, but you know what? He might lower taxes.
right.
And
But the
that's
thing
the
is
thing
this.
that nobody wants to say out loud.
No
Is
one says this stuff. And the thing is,
okay.
like, we gotta be able to see through these things. We gotta be able to see, okay, how have people reacted when and again, it's both sides. It's like it's not like I'm picking on Trump, because I could say the same things about Biden and how he's
Yeah,
like just doing an
politics
awful
sucks.
job.
It
Yeah,
really
all
does.
politics suck. That's what the Epicureans said. If you want to be a happy person, just stay out of politics. Like, just stay out of it.
Yeah,
And they
where
said
is
this
my
like
bread in circuses anyway?
thousands of years ago.
I mean,
But the thing is this,
they were
um,
happy with their bread. God damn it! So,
I think it's helpful for people to know or to see that um we can do better as a society. Even if you're like, I don't care about religion, even if you're one of those people, you can say we could definitely do better with our leaders. Like, you can't say Biden is the best leader you can pick or Trump is the best leader you can pick. They're
no,
because they're not, like, objectively, they're not the best. Like, out of 300 million people, there has to be two people who are qualified at their job, they know what they're doing, and they have upstanding moral character. There have to
honestly,
be at least
if
two
Mac
people.
was a candidate, I would vote for Mac. I don't care
Please,
what
I
party
would
he stood
ruin
for.
the country. I would
Oh yeah,
mess
no, you
everything up
would,
the
but
first day. Yeah.
I would honestly vote for you over Biden or Trump.
That's
Um,
not a compliment.
I would vote
Like,
for
I would
Darren
vote
though
for a
over Biden or
random.
Trump. So,
I would vote. I would vote for Sal.
and I,
But the thing
Sal,
is,
you just became president, my friend.
yeah. But the thing is, uh, people care about the economy, but and someone says the economy does better than a Democrat. No, that's not true. Republicans always are better for the economy. Um,
I think that's
Actually, that's not
probably.
true.
I look.
that's
I'm
that's
not. I'm not gonna.
100% true.
I'm not gonna
Right,
fight
but
with
the
that
thing is this,
historically.
that's a verifiable fact. But people care about the economy when it comes down to this, and that's because American society, by and large, is a very materialistic society. It's very hedonistic. It's very stuffy. We're very comfortable people. We are so comfortable that when people from other parts of the world show up here and they're like, wow, you guys are too comfortable. So, and you're trying to make life uncomfortable for yourselves. And you're like, why do you want to do that? And so the biggest issue, the biggest challenge for Americans is to find a way to transcend petty politics where it's like we're just, squabbling over, like we're fighting each other over issues that we know deep down, at least some people know that they don't really care about. So I know that a lot of Republicans care about the economy, but they'll say it's because of the transgenders or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And you
So
have people who are like, "Oh, I'm Republican because I don't want to pay lots of taxes because I'm a one percenter." And then they'll say, "No, it's because I care about this minor issue over here." And so
yeah.
there's lots of gamesmanship happening, which is like so. frustrating to see. And the same thing is happening on the Democrat side of things. They say, "Oh, we care about social issues, about race issues," but deep down inside, it's because they wanna, like
It's a
change
government
how the
subsidy
government
or
works.
something like that. It's there is there's definitely some room for both sidesism, and unfortunately, that's a very terrible place to end this discussion. But the discussion has come to an end. Usually, this would be a place for closing comments. I'm going to let Mac's statement stand as closing comments, and this is where we would normally end the show, and we would do an after show for 20-30 minutes max. The after show got out of hand last week. It got out of control. Somebody didn't have their hand on the wheel. We're going to do better this time. But the reason that we're doing this format, and it's going to kick in soon, is because Mac and I are at some point, when one of us gets a freaking break, set up a thing where people can donate to us. Not because we're doing such a great job. We suck. They can do it because there's much good to be done in the world. And we are going to support one of those goods with 100% of your donations. And we will try to milk that out of you by offering an after show, possibly behind a paywall. We'll see. But that's why for the last few weeks I've been saying that's the end of the show, now after show. And so that's the end of the show, now after show. In this after show, as you know, there are no real rules here, so just behave yourselves or not. And we got about 20 or 30 minutes. I'm not doing 2 hours today. I'm
Let's do
not doing
40 minutes.
I'm not doing
40
okay,
hard
40 minutes.
stop, hard
It's
stop,
a
40 minutes.
40-minute hard stop. Now, in fact, I want to say that when the hand of the clock hits the 6, so whatever country you're in, just whenever it hits the 6, the big hand hits the 6, it's over.
It's
So,
over.
the issue that I want to discuss exclusively for this after show is one that I teased during the show, which is overthrowing the government. We might say violent revolt here. When is it okay to overthrow the government? I'm going to take the first bite of this apple because I have a more expensive mic. So that's just as good a way to judge it as any. So that said, if you are a secularist, then we have the Constitution, and we can say that the Constitution tells us when we can overthrow the government. If you are a Christian, I am not entirely sure you have access to the same Constitution in the same way to say that we can overthrow the government. And the reason I say that, and I made this argument earlier in the show, and our Christians were not, neither of our Christians were here at the time, so they can now react to this. If our Constitution made a law, if we amended the Constitution to say it is okay to murder people if you really, really hate them, all right? If that becomes the law of the land, and the only thing you have to prove in court is if you really, really hated them or not, okay? But it's okay to murder them if you do. No Christian would murder someone, not credibly, and give as a defense of their Christian faith, yeah, but I live in a system where the Constitution gives me the right to murder people. No one would say that because the Constitution be damned. That's not the Constitution you're under. You're under a different Constitution which says you don't get to murder ever. And so you might say, well, that's not fair for Christians to not be able to murder, but everyone else can murder. It's not, well, yeah, it's not fair, but you chose to be a Christian. All right. That's the system that you chose. So never mind what our secular system allows us to do. You're a Christian. You're under a different set of laws that you invoke anytime you want to. Well, that set of laws says you can't murder people. You can't use our Constitution to give you the right to murder people. Let me just finish this thought. And so in that sense, you can't go to the Constitution to say, well, we can overthrow the government based on the fact that it is constitutionally allowed to do so. You have to do it within the confines and realm of your theological constitution. It has nothing to do with a man-made constitution at that point. So it has to be a God ordained thing, regardless of what your constitution allows you to do. So I will just offer that as the first volley in this ensuing free for all over when it is okay to overthrow a government, how you do that, what that looks like. Floor's open.
And then I'll spike it back and say, like, I'm very disappointed because I expected that we would disagree because this is politics. That's what people do. Um, I agree with what you said there, but I'll say that in the sense that Christians, like, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying Christians are only citizens of God's kingdom. And so when it comes to earthly situations, then we're kind of like hands off-ish. But I believe that it's because Christians are citizens of God's kingdom that they can then participate in the earthly realm as fully and as freely as they want to. And that doesn't mean doing whatever they want. That means recognizing that the government, again, Romans 13, has been appointed by God. And so when the government says, do this thing that goes against God's constitution, in this case, for example, stop telling people about the gospel or stop preaching, then we say to the government, tough luck. And if the government says, okay, we're going to put you in prison, then we say, okay, right? So it's not a question of like uh, giving the government autonomous authority to do what it wants at any time. It's more like the government itself is under God, and so it has responsibilities to fulfill. With that said, if a government becomes rogue, right, it starts doing unjust things like killing babies or doing these things, we have the right to tell the government, you're doing something wrong. You are disobeying God and such and such and such. The issue then is if the government, let's say, passes a law that makes it that like life just becomes inconvenient for Christians. Not that it's saying anything about God theologically or about the spread of Christianity, but it's just making people like saying like, okay, on Sundays you have to pay $5 because if you're going to church, you gotta pay $5, something like that, which is pretty weird, and we can't tell. That's a pretty bad example, but let's say an example that just makes life inconvenient for everyone. Can we as Christians overthrow the government? And the answer to that is no, we can't. Like, we don't have that mandate from God to be like, let's get up and get some guns and some swords, whatever, and let's go overthrow the government.
I
That's
don't know
not
how you
something
define evil, though, in this terms. I think rogue. If the government goes rogue, and maybe Dale can
like
add some
I'm
color to this
like,
too.
let's say North
Let me
Korea
hang on. Let me just say,
level.
yeah, North Korea. How do you define rogue when we have Putin? How do you define rogue when we have North Korea? How do you define rogue when we have communist China? How how do you define rogue in a way that's meaningful? Because all of those governments are established by God too.
Right. So like Christians in China right now, right? Like like their primary uh mission isn't to find a way to kill the president of China. Their allegiance is to Christ, is to God. And so they are called to suffer in this unfortunate situation to the glory of God, which I know sounds awful to lots of people. Be like, oh, that sounds like you're just cowering
Right, but
and you're
why
just
can't
giving up.
they overturn it? If they had enough numbers, why wouldn't it be their God ordained duty to overturn it since that government is rogue? Once
Because
again, it
God's
comes to how do
kingdom
you define
isn't
rogue?
right, because God's kingdom isn't something that you establish by force, like like Islam, where it's like if you have the numbers, then you can tell people what to do, right? Christianity is about self-sacrifice because that's what God did by sending his son Jesus on the down the cross. And so It's not about, like if we have the numbers, which is kind of what is happening in America right now. People are like saying, oh, we have the numbers. We can just totally get rid of these guys, which is totally wrong. It's totally anti-Christian to do things like that because um, it doesn't promote the message of the gospel going forth. Christians have two missions. Okay, fulfill the Great Commission, tell people about Christ, and to be the hands and feet of Jesus on the earth. That means love your neighbor as you love yourself. If you see your neighbor suffering, help him out, right? Tell people about Jesus and actually tangibly help them out like Jesus would. And so the thing is, Christians, those are the two mandates we have. But if we get distracted from those two, then we start thinking like a secular person would, where it's like, let's try and make life more comfortable for ourselves. And that happens to be revolutionary wars and all these kind of things, which may happen, right? They could happen. But even if they do happen, that's still under the sovereign hand of God. What human beings are responsible for are the things that are right in front of them. What has God told me he expects of me? What should I be doing right now? I should be loving him and I should be loving my neighbor. If that's not possible, then I shouldn't try and find a workaround around it.
So Dale, to you specifically, if let's say let's say Biden is duly elected as the next president, and he becomes literally, not just rhetorically, as bad as Putin and turns America into Russia, then in that situation, America would be Russia. But but so are you saying that Russians should overthrow their country too? What is the recipe? What is the trigger that says, oh, well, this country went rogue. This went so far off of God's plan that it should be overthrown. How do you measure that? If a president were able to erase the Constitution, and now we're Russia. How do you measure that and say, well, now that's rogue and we should overthrow? However, Russia, they should be content to be in the situation God put them in.
Are you asking me or
I I
because
I, I was throwing
oh,
this to Dale, but if
oh,
but Dale's not unmuted yet. But
oh.
take it away.
Yeah, so that's the challenge then for like if you're operating my, I guess, Molinistic standards where it's like where God has a calculator and he's calculating things, and you're stuck in a very dangerous position where you're stuck. So you become kind of like the person who's checking God's homework. I mean, like, it seems like this, which is so dangerous to be in. Um, because the Bible says again, all authority has been established by God. But what Christians are responsible for isn't trying to ascertain what God's sovereign will is. It's doing what God has told us visibly and clearly to do, which is to endure persecution if it comes, to love our neighbors, to pray for our enemies, to do all these things, to care for our neighbors. If they're hungry, to feed them. If they revile us, like give them cold water, things like that, to do those things because that's how the kingdom of God spreads. Ironically enough, that's how it spreads in a system of worldliness where naturally how governments spread is by force. You take a sword, you take a gun, and you go invade someone's land. That's how governments start, right? That's how America started. People came over here and killed the natives, and like, no, we're Americans. Um, but the kingdom of God does not spread like that. It spreads by the power of the gospel, by God enabling people to go out as missionaries and telling the good news and treating people in the image of God as they're supposed to do. And even in a tyrannical government, like in the Bible, you have men like Daniel, right? Whole book of Daniel. There we have Joseph in Egypt. These men were put in secular, hostile environments, and they were able to, in a sense, change the culture from within by being faithful to God instead of trying to overthrow the Pharaoh of Egypt by
Right.
killing God.
And if the
Right?
audience can handle another Bible quotation from an atheist, whatsoever circumstance you find yourself in, let you should therein be content. There is a
And
there's
there's a verse. Sorry,
this is
sorry. There's a verse in Jeremiah that says to pray for the city in which you're exiled. And so when the Israelites were exiled to random cities, God tells them, don't, ruffle the feathers. Pray for that city to prosper.
Right,
right?
and Paul echoes that by telling the church at Ephesus and places where Timothy was to pray for the leaders of the country. That was their responsibility. So when you talk about things like being content in your situation, you have to understand the situation that Paul was speaking into was situations like, oh, you're a slave. Oh, you're under a tyrannical government. You're divorced or what have you. You are have some handicap, whatever your situation is. Uh, it is to trust God that He's got the big picture stuff taken care of, and
Yes.
your
Sorry.
response is contentment in the situation that God put you in. Now, granted, I don't I don't think that's terribly good advice. So
Well,
I'm
I gotta jump in because
okay.
that's not what he's saying. Because he says if you're a slave and you can get your freedom, get it, right? So whatever Harriet Tubman was doing, she was following that verse actually.
Yeah,
She was
I
like,
actually disagree with you on
I'm out
that.
of here. No,
I think that when he said get if you can get your obtain your freedom, get it. I think he meant obtaining it through legal means, such as
legal
buying your
means
way out of your freedom. So it was
like
because you could pay your way out of
right.
slavery. Someone. So that was a way of getting it. So that I don't want to
But
get
also you could run away. So the Mosaic Law actually made a provision for a slave to run away if the master was just being a jerk to that person.
okay. Well,
You could run away as
I
a
would say
slave.
that whatever the quote unquote constitutional legal means of obtaining your freedom, that would be what that verse entailed, and it wouldn't have entailed illegal things to obtain your freedom, such as overthrow the government because the government allows slavery.
Right, because
Um,
Christians were not in the business of overthrowing the government.
right, and so,
That's not their mandate.
when I brought up the passage of contentment, I just wanted to just show or add that this was people in bad circumstances, people in circumstances where there's actual persecution,
Right.
actual
Not
persecution,
American person.
right?
Not American.
We're talking real persecution, and this is where Christian contentment finds its expression. And so I'm just saying that, at least from a Christian point of view, I don't see the opening that some Christians see to overthrow the government. Now, let me just go
There is one.
further. Let me go further than that, though, and more controversial, so that more people can hate me, because I feel like
Okay.
there's not enough hate coming my way. I'm not getting hate mail.
Me
Uh,
too.
you send your hate mail to reasonpress uh, .net. Okay, folks, reasonpress at gmail.com. That's where we take our hate mail. You're welcome, Andrew and Matt. So I actually don't, in these times, I don't I don't think it is fit for secularists to overthrow the government either.
But that's
It,
something that that's
it
a
is it is
secularist
it
could
is in
do.
the Constitution. I agree. However, I think the Constitution is a largely irrelevant document today. I said I had some controversy to stir. Um, it's not irrelevant because it is kind of the foundation of the law of the land. It's irrelevant because we haven't kept it up to date, and we've treated it like a religion. We've treated it like a Bible, like it was the stone tablet that came down from Moses and God. And so, oh, this is the Constitution, and it must be obeyed and cannot be considered wrong in any way. And we're so slow to amend the damn thing, and
But
we
it gets
should.
amended.
It
Yeah.
does, but it's hard to amend sacred text. The Bible gets amended too. All right.
Nope. But all right.
Yeah, I mean, we got the ending of Mark.
That's for another day. That's for another
Yes,
day.
it is.
But
But I
like,
mean, our understandings of the Bible certainly get amended over time.
oh, for sure. Okay, I
And
agree with that one. The
and
understanding.
right,
Okay.
and our Constitution, it's great scaffolding, but it's not the building. And so, yes, the Constitution says that talks about a well-armed militia. The vast majority of people who are alive today don't know what a militia is in that context. They have no idea what that is referring to, and they just kind of map those words onto our situation and say, "You see, that's perfect fit." It is not. And so
Yeah.
when you talk about, overthrowing a government, I think that that existed in a time when the government was very young and shaky, and there were a lot of crazy people with some ideas who could have very easily overthrown the government. George
Become president.
Washington, a different day, he may have accepted the position of king. Okay, so
It's actually yeah.
the idea that somehow it was all sacred and set in stone that it was going to become what it is simply not true. And so I can see very much within the first 20 years of our Constitution a time when, yeah, maybe we should overthrow the government.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna jumping real fast, and it's like, yeah, it was a different time, and again, I don't know how you feel about America, but I love America, and
yeah,
and mostly people like that's a thing that's become kind of be tough for people to say today because being patriotic is not in style or in view, maybe with the younger generations or something. But the thing is this, when people talk about overthrowing their own country, it just makes me just so uneasy because I don't think you know what you're talking about. You're saying you're gonna press the reset button, and like it's because you don't like things how they are. You're gonna go like
right.
also how do
You're
you
going to
overthrow a
reset the
government?
clock to 250 years ago. Is that the reset?
Is that the reset button you're talking about? Have you really thought about it? Or like when people say, how even then, I don't think this. How are you gonna overthrow a government that has nukes?
Right, right. I mean, yeah, I got this AK-47 off of the dark web. Oh, you have a tank. Never
Yeah, for
mind.
some reason, I keep getting these videos. I don't know, maybe I'm a target audience of like America is going to be in so much trouble. Here's how to survive and get this kit and get that kit. And I'm like, okay, but the government has nukes. So even
Right.
if I wanted to get my buddies and I and everyone in my Facebook group
It
to,
doesn't make
to
sense.
become
Talk of overthrowing the government if it does this or that. It doesn't make sense. We look. This is the
it's
government we have.
unpractical.
It is not the government that the founding fathers created. This is a government that we have today, and that's perfectly legitimate, and that's fine. And we have to find ways to, steer the government in better directions. And the direction is always wrong if you want to do a 180 and steer it and go the other way. That's never the right direction. We have to find better ways forward. And so to get forward, we have to get past this opportunity. I mean, this opportunity, this idea that if the government pisses me off enough and I think they've done the wrong thing, I'm
Then I
gonna
got
I'm gonna
them.
overthrow them.
I'm gonna
That's
take my
not
gun. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
that's not that's not the way
That's not
forward.
how change happens anymore. But
Even
that
from a
doesn't mean
Christian perspective. Yeah.
right. And I'm just speaking as a secularist. I think that secularists who talk that way are out of their goddamn stupid fool minds. And I will just repeat a thing that I have said many times and that people ignore because of cognitive dissonance, what have you. I think that atheist crazy has the potential to be way worse than Christian crazy,
No,
because
it's not
Christian
even
crazy.
potentially. It is worse.
Well,
It is
look,
worse.
I have said it is worse. Look, Christian
Okay.
crazy
Uh,
has
Why would that
has
offend
certain
someone?
Christian crazy has boundaries. It has some boundaries, and you can negotiate those boundaries. You can talk about things within those boundaries. Atheist crazy doesn't have any boundaries. there's
Yeah, and that's what people
there's
are
no way to
afraid of.
bound the crazy here, and I understand why Christians would be afraid of that, because at least Christians imperfectly, they've got this set of overarching boundaries that, if you somewhat stay within that, at least you don't go too far off. And the secularists, there's nothing to keep them going too far off. I get all that. I totally get all that. Unfortunately, I think that people are have just been wrong about
Right,
Christian
right.
boundaries, because what Christians have done is expanded their boundaries out at almost as far as the atheist boundaries. And so that's where you kind of lose the high ground there, because
You
if
lose the Christian, like the salt and the light thing. And I'm seeing in the chat, Dale's upset. It's one-sided. It's like, no, it's not one-sided. Like
Mac is
in one sense,
literally a Calvinist, man. This
literally,
I couldn't be as
like
further away from that. This can't be one
we're
sided.
so far from each other theologically, but it's like it's not one-sided if in this issue, like listen, like people like to hate on John Calvin. And I'm like, it's like, oh, what was he doing in Switzerland? He was like, yeah, it was so terrible, right? It was so awful. It was giving people, you're getting fined because you're not going to church. You're like, when was the last time you were at church? 2 weeks ago. Oh, you didn't go last week. Here's a fine. And it's like that's kind of the thing that was happening over there. Fine for his time, I guess, but
The
like in a sense that okay, when we're talking about issues like this where someone gets upset, like, oh, you're just taking sides with someone who's not a Christian, like, yeah, I want to take sides if the truth is on their side, like David, if the truth is on your side, I'm going to take your side if it's on your side.
and if
It's
the
not
truth is
about,
on yours, I'm going to take your side,
yeah. And so like
like the scumbag Mayor Adams.
I'm not going to say
That guy.
Christians should overthrow the Biden government if he, let's say he steals the election. Let's say it's like so blatant that you see him putting like this video footage of him stuffing ballots in in boxes, and it's irrefutable proof. Should Christians like pick up guns and go storm DC and die?
So
No,
look, the clock has
that's
four
my
numbers.
answer.
There are four numbers until it gets to a six. So you and I have had some very unholy disagreement. Let's see if Darren and Dale find some common ground here, because I suspect they both disagree with us. Uh, uh, Darren, you don't say much usually, so first bite of the apple if you want to. Dale, just jump on in. Let's hear it, man. I think Mac and I have stated our piece on this. Overthrow
You've
the
sort of
government.
I
wandered
gotta
around a
reply
bit.
to some stuff. I'm sorry, Darren. Like I'll respond to some stuff later about being a hypocrite and siding with the Nazis, but that's okay. I'll talk about that later. That's what Dale said, but it's okay. Go ahead,
All
Darren.
right,
You guys sort of wandered around what exactly, whether was this question still about when it's okay to overthrow government?
sure.
Uh, you know, I think it was mentioned while you guys were talking, but governments are always overthrown when enough people decide that they want to overthrow it. I mean, there's no cosmic law about governments or anything. It's usually a might makes right thing. I mean, even democracy is sort of that way because you take the most vote, count the whoever has the most votes. So I would guess it would be appropriate to overthrow government as soon as you can gather enough people to actually do it.
Okay,
Wait,
look,
is that moral then? Is that okay by your system?
Uh, I not really, but that's sort of the reality of history.
But that's
you're
natural.
making a pragmatic argument. It's almost a tautology. Um,
Okay.
what you're saying there. So yeah, people overthrow governments when they really, really want to, and they are able to do it. But the real question is, um, when is it acceptable? Because I think that there are a lot of things that we can do that aren't acceptable, that don't make any sense to do it, and that ultimately does more harm than good. And that's why I'm on the side
Well,
of not. I mean, why
I
the
mean,
hell are we
you're correct, but
trying
I
to
think
overthrow a government?
you're correct, but I think the problem is that if you can convince enough people to overthrow the government, then those people obviously think it's acceptable. So I mean, yes, you are correct to say that it should only be done when it's acceptable, but each person's opinion on when it's acceptable is going to be vastly different.
When should the Russian citizens, overthrow their government, or do they have a right to overthrow their government? I mean, to me, look, I have the unprecedented privilege of having been born in America. I say unprecedented. Millions of people are born in America. There's lots of precedents, but it's a truly enviable
Mm.
position of
Liberty.
privilege. Honestly, I am. I am a person of privilege. I guarantee I'm the most economically depressed of any of the people who ever appears on these shows. That's me, hand up. But and yet I can say, without hesitation or blush, I am uh, privileged beyond measure compared to the vast majority of people in the world. And so the fact that we can even have this conversation, and the only thing that happens is we might get ruffled feelings, is great. That's amazing. But if I were born in Russia or China, and let's say China,
Saudi Arabia.
and I'm going to go with China. I don't. There's nothing. I can't even say the thing I'm about to say if you put me in Saudi Arabia. Such is my prejudice. But if I were born in beautiful China, um, I think that I could be very happy as a Chinese citizen. And
I
even
don't think you would.
if I had misgivings about communism, let's say I had, you see, you have to understand, I was born in China, so I don't even know any of this American privilege. I have
You
the
would be
Chinese
miserable though.
internet. I have the firewall of China. So if I'm born in that situation, I am very certain that I could be much like millions of Chinese people, hundreds of millions of Chinese people who have carved out a good life for themselves in that system.
A good
I
life.
a good life, yes, a good
Oh
life.
man,
I think I could be a person who had a family and a couple of rugrats. Um,
you could only have one child.
I'm sorry, one rugrat and a pet iguana. I think I could be there, and I can see that under an oppressive system like China, and it says something about me that I can't say the same thing about any Arab nation, any Muslim nation. I cannot see myself being a happy Muslim, so that's I think that speaks more to my prejudice than anything else. But um, if this country, if Hitler had won, and by the time I was born, people were speaking German, I'd be a happy German.
No,
Absolutely, because I wouldn't know any other way. Look, we're happy
you'd be in
Americans.
a concentration camp.
We are happy Americans, Mac, but we stole the country from the natives here. So what if you were a Native American? Could you have been a happy Native American? Absolutely, you could have. But America came along, and then we did what we did, and now we're happy
But even the
Americans.
natives themselves, they came here and they probably
I
brought
understand.
other
I'm not
people
trying to
here.
deify them. They were not saints, but they were here first. That's all I'm saying. And
Then there were
so
other people before them,
it
and the thing is
well, they
this.
were
Okay,
here first compared to us.
compared
Is what I'm
to
saying, right?
European settlers, yes,
So
correct.
if we could be happy as conquering happy Americans, we could have been happy if we were born in different circumstances where German had conquered us.
But
So
the question is, knowing what you know, like when you look at what people go through in like Arab countries, and you're like, are those people real? And this is like one giant parable about salvation. I gotta bring it back to that because if you're born, if you're born in this state being both a government and also a natural inclination, where it's like your freedoms are restricted, and all you know is listening to what Big Brother says and suffering and oppression and you're like I can carve out a good life like then you're not really living life to the fullest. In a very real
granted,
sense, that's what
I
sin
I
does to human beings.
I fully agree with that accounting, but I would say that even in America, we're not living life to the fullest. So
Yes, we're not. That's the
you
irony. Like
believe that
even as
there's a
good as it gets, people are still struggling with suicide and
right.
drug
No,
addiction.
the only difference that we have on this point is that you think that the better life is a heavenly better life with God unlocking our freedoms, and I
That's
think
the
that
only one.
I
That's
think that a better life would be, some type of utopia where humanity has socially evolved to a point.
still wouldn't be
Uh,
enough. Still
I
wouldn't be enough. Like even if we
I
go a
understand
million
that
years in the
different
future.
debate, but we both acknowledge the fact that the thing we have right now as happy Americans is still only a shadow of what we believe
Yes,
life could be.
correct. It's like it's so faint. Like it's in terms of earthly standards, Americans are blessed and number one in terms of comfort, in terms of liberty, in terms of freedom, number one in terms of that stuff.
Yeah,
But it's still not even there yet, not
it's
even
not
close
there.
to what.
And
Yeah,
I think 1,000 years from now, we will look back at our history and say, wait a minute, we revolted from England to live like that. That's
working
what we thought
nine
the
to
goal
five,
was.
working a 9 to 5, 40 hours a
Right.
week, you
we
know,
we did all this for that.
retire at 65, all these things, and other future generations would be like, wow, you guys were such cavemen. But
Yes.
like the thing is, like relatively, we're like, no, we were
God
so
save the
free, we were
queen.
so happy, you know. Like some guy probably in the future is gonna stumble on this recording and be like, people in the 21st century were so weird. They thought they had freedom. Um, but again, it's like even that society, 1,000 years from now, they still will have problems. They will still have issues they need to get past. That's assuming we don't nuke ourselves first. But like ultimately, the human soul longs for God's kingdom where there will be absolute freedom, and we don't have to worry about overthrowing the government. We don't have to worry about, like, what if this guy steals the election? Like, people are already like after timing. Like, the election hasn't happened yet, and people are saying
Yeah.
it's already stolen.
I mean,
Um,
man, what a man. Anyway, look,
like it's both sides though. It's like honestly, David, this happened to me yesterday. You wouldn't like I'm not lying to you. I'm sitting at work. A guy walks in, he's looking for my boss. My boss is out of the room and he says, "Okay, do you know I'm going to Wisconsin?" I'm like, "Oh, what's in Wisconsin?" And he's like, I'm a Democrat. I'm a registered Democrat. Then he pulls out his card and he shows me, look, I'm registered as a Democrat leader in Wisconsin. I'm like, oh, I'm doing a politics show tomorrow. This is interesting. And then he says, do you know that Trump stole the 2016 election? And at that point, I'm already done. I don't want this conversation to continue at work. And he starts telling me all his facts. This happened and this happened. And I'm like, just please stop talking to me. Like, that's what I'm thinking. And it's like everyone already has this mindset that the election is going to be stolen again. And it's both sides. Republicans are saying it, Democrats are saying it, and it just ruins the whole, like, are we trying to be better? Are we trying to advance as the human race? Or are we simply trying to regress things and be like, it's just about making myself more comfortable?
Yeah, I don't know what we're doing. I mean, look, I will say as a final thought, um, because we're getting close to the six, and someone else might have something to say. So as a final thought for me, the thing that I would ask people to do is to step away from the ledge. Let's just take a couple of steps back from the ledge. Um, this is it. I remember a time when elections were, it was a civic duty and everyone was kind of excited about it and happy to do it. And, there would be some wrangling about, oh, that guy's a jerk or that guy's going to, take the economy or that. But it was just a thing that you could talk about in a bar. And then when the day came, people voted and the ballots are counted and the state electoral votes are tallied up. Someone would move in to the White House, and then we'd have a day where we coordinate our king, and then we go back to work. We go
Yeah.
back to work. It's not even a day off. It's not a. It's not a national. Do you know how unimportant these elections are? It's not a freaking day off. So you're still gonna work. You're still gonna go to the store and buy milk so that your kids have cereal the next morning, and you're still gotta arrange rides to school, and you've got to do all of that stuff that you did. And people were very good at going through this cycle and then going back to work, and then we're just Americans again. And it didn't matter, it was almost like a sports event. Okay, well, our team will get you next time. And that's it. That's it.
Mhm.
And somewhere along the way, it became something else. It's not that anymore. It's certainly not fun. It's
Yeah.
scary. It's seasons are scary, and they get scarier by the day.
By
And
the minute.
and it's
Yeah.
not that we're like, oh well, some guy will win, some guy will lose. It's like all of a civilization will be destroyed if it's
If this
that
guy wins.
right.
Yeah.
It's at that level on all sides, and it's so crazy. Everybody's getting their gun and buying a tank from Amazon, which is weird. Didn't know they even sold tanks, and I don't understand what has happened to the world, but it does feel like we are within the last 4 to 8 years of election systems as we know it. It
As
feels
America,
like
yeah,
that.
because no, you're right, and I'm sorry if you're not done. Like I just want to agree with you, but like this thing happens in other places in the world where, like they see like places with dictators, like in Uganda with that guy Idi Amin, and all these places where like they're like, if this guy gets in power, then he's not leaving, and that what's happened is that has seeped into the American system, and people are more scared now. They don't have confidence in their ability to pick leaders because they're picking really bad leaders, and it's like so much anxiety, so much fear. And it's like, again, and also there's a whole other thing I wanted to talk about, but I overslept. But I wanted to mention, like, when it comes to American politics, it's not just American stuff. Like, like this should just be like an in-house thing, but we have so many players. We have the world involved now. We have the internet, right? You go on a forum, you don't even know if the person you're talking to can vote or is even an American, but they're talking like they live in Kentucky or something, right?
Right.
And they're giving their opinion. They're like, "Hey, if Trump wins," and part of this is like espionage and all these things, and it just clouds everyone's vision and understanding. You think you're outnumbered when you're not, or you think people are just losing their minds. But like there's also like this whole vast array of people who are invested in American politics. And so like if you're chronically online, that's not gonna help you. At the like there's so many videos coming out, there's so much uh information articles that are saying this guy did this today, this guy said that 5 years ago, and it's like overload, overload, overload. And that creates distrust for the person who lives next to you, who has a Biden sticker or has a Trump sticker, because you think that they know about what you know.
Right.
And they're choosing to ignore it.
In many places in the world, when one regime comes to power, thousands, tens of thousands of people die. That's how power changes hands. And from comments that you hear today in Christian circles and otherwise, it's we're getting closer and closer to, if that person wins, thousands of people are going to die in a bloodbath. That's and it feels like we're 4 to 8 years away from that being a reality. And what I just ask everybody is to really assess. Um, how are you doing uh, during the Obama administration? How are you doing? How is your family? Was your family good? Did you talk? Did your kids graduate school? Did you go to church? What were you doing then? Did that change when Trump became president? How are you doing? Did what happened there? Did that change when Biden became president? How are you doing? If you kind of bring this down to a human scale, you'll realize it's the what is it, the Sturm and Drang uh, that's being stirred is insane. It's just insane. People have become whipped into a frenzy that if one political outcome happens as opposed to another, that life as we know it comes to an end. And that is that if we don't become stupid, that's simply not going to be true. Right?
That's not true.
It's
And it's
just
almost like it's because Americans, in a sense, are very sheltered from like the horrors of what happens in other places in the world. That the fact that some people are actually looking forward to something like that is just like, do you know how that's gonna mess everything up? That like the comfy life that you know is just gonna go away.
right.
Like,
Nobody wins in that
no one
scenario.
no one
If
wins
you
in
if
that
you are a
scenario.
Trump supporter and there is a civil war that puts Trump in the White House and keeps him in the White House, you're gonna die.
Possibly gonna die. You're
You're
possibly gonna die because
very likely your
someone
family's gonna suffer. Even those who live, the economy is going to be zero. Your
gonna
position on
be
the world stage is trash. You're gonna be bumfucked. Egypt is what you're gonna be, and that's if you win.
and then you have the situation that you have the other big countries like Russia and China who are just chomping at the bit for America to get into a civil war so that they can become the number one superpower. So it just doesn't stop with what happens locally with Trump in the White House. You have these other big nations who are like waging war currently all over the place. They're just the worst. They're starting wars over there in the Middle East or they're funding the wars. They become the new top guys, and it's like because you did like that this guy is in the White House, and it's like you're just selling away your inheritance to buy bubble gum in return, and it's
Yeah,
it's just not worth it. Like, and from a Christian point of view, like you should be on the front lines telling people peace, telling people about Christ, telling people about faith, about repentance, about all these things. Because if you're the guy who's panicking over there, then you're like, and I'm not panicking. I'm like, if I join your camp, do I have to panic like that? Because recently we've been getting bombarded with all kinds of anomalies, if you would call them that, where we have Iran attacking Israel, and then we have an eclipse, and then we have an earthquake, which is just a bad combination for a Southern Baptist preacher to see who's really in love with Revelation to see, and it's like it's end times now, right? Right? It's
yeah,
the end times, and this gets fed to people, and people just get into a frenzy and they get hysterical, and it's like, oh no, 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 we gotta do things instead of resting in Christ, resting in God, trusting that God knows what He's doing, as opposed to just, you know, going off what Tucker Carlson is saying today.
right.
Like,
And
oh,
I gotta
what's
tell
it?
you,
Yeah.
no matter who wins, I'm gonna love my neighbor. I'm not going to do it because Jesus said to do it. I'm going to do it because that's what I do. I work in an environment that's full of crazy right wingers. I mean, not just right wingers. Some of them are crazy. I love them all. All right, I have good relationships with everybody, even though I don't, I speak against things like government accommodation of religion, things like that. I don't need a government mandate to accommodate people. So one of the things that I've done recently in my job is I did all of the photography for a photo gallery that I'm creating as a part of our new website. And just as a for instance, if someone had said, well, I know you're doing these pictures on Friday, but for me, Friday is a religious Sabbath, and I can't take pictures on a religious Sabbath, and I can only take pictures, at 12 o'clock midnight on a Saturday. I would have said, great, meet me here at work at 12 o'clock midnight on a Saturday, and I will take your picture.
Right,
That would
right.
just been the end of it. There wouldn't No one would have needed to do any kind of religious accommodation or to talk of
Or
government.
put it into the
That
law or
that
something,
is
right?
simply what would have happened, and the same is true for me. There, if I were to say, "Oh, look, man, I can't do this thing and I feel comfortable doing that or being that way," they would have said, "No problem. How can we help you do it?" We don't have to go to the brink
The
to
government.
be good citizens and good neighbors to people that we love. And
Right,
Yeah,
right.
but
this
you
is
both are saying a lot of good things, and and I don't necessarily disagree with either of you. However, this sort of lackadaisical idea, although it's great, it's sort of why women lost bodily autonomy rights because the
Oh boy.
people who we vote actually does matter. Um, Voting does matter because the people that we vote in have their own ideas of how things happen, and if we're not careful, then we people get end up getting voted where that starts rolling back civil rights.
Before the year is over, Darren, I will make a promise to you that even if Mac doesn't want to do it, we'll do a special. We'll do a show on abortion because it's time to talk
Wait,
about
then
that again.
we already did that before.
We
Um,
did it years
but
ago.
but
Well,
So,
I'm not
I don't
talking just abortion. I'm talking everything.
I know
Like,
I understand, and I'm just saying I'm not going to engage with it right now. I will let the statement stand uncommented, but we will do a fuller show on some of those things. And
that's
I
a
do
big issue.
I
But the thing
honestly I wish that
is,
Dale had stuck around because I think that you and Dale would have had a lot of agreement uh, on this because I used to feel like that, Darren, and I used to be way more high strung about all of this stuff. And I've just lived enough life. I think you and I are probably not that far apart in age, but I've lived
about
enough
5 years, I
life.
think.
I've lived enough life so that I can just say when people don't act insane, and when we can tolerate just losing a match and coming back and doing better the next time, and not pinning the stakes of humanity on a single contest, when we can do that, things tend to go okay. We're okay. It's
right,
okay, and
and
that's
everything
all
was
I'm
okay.
trying to say.
David,
That
everything was okay until I realized, yeah, sometimes things are not okay. So, for instance, the issue with abortion, and it's like, all right, there's an issue where the government recently has just been, you know, doing stuff.
right,
And
but the government did the stuff within the bounds of government. Okay, and so
right, and that's a
before,
case where Christians would be not overthrow the government, but tell the government no, right?
yeah,
Tell it
I don't,
that that's not moral.
right, but there are
Well,
ways
Right.
there.
except it wasn't government. It was 3 Supreme Court seats that were stolen by one party over
that
nothing.
were
So
appointed by a
appointed
duly
appointed by
elected
the
president.
president.
So
Yes, exactly, David. They
I
Well,
the
have
sort of.
president the
I
president did what he could do under his power and
right
jurisdiction. He didn't steal them. He
right
did his job.
No, he stole them.
no, he did not
That
steal him.
Yeah,
Sorry.
the entire Republican side stonewalled the previous president that should have appointed the one of those seats.
Agreed
No,
and agreed and agreed. Look, that's the political game.
that's not how
Okay,
it works.
they succeeded, and they did so within the bounds of law. Look, no one's covering glory here, but the Republicans won that battle, and we have the court that we have. The
You have to
fact of the
accept it.
matter is, I am against lifetime appointed judges. I'm against lifetime appointed anythings when it has to do with the government, and so I just think the whole system is bad. Even if you get 9 judges that are righteous in all of their judgments, they should have limits on how long
Okay.
they can rule. That's
But
just
then
me.
that creates a whole bunch of problems too. But lifetime appointments, the Republicans won that battle. They didn't do anything illegal. They did the legal thing. Um,
No,
the big thing.
they just broke tradition, which
Right,
was
and
they
it's possible to break tradition.
Who
For
cares
instance,
about
by
tradition?
you can
well, the problem is they didn't put a lot of that into law because they thought tradition would hold. So the
right,
tradition was sort of their law,
but let me
but they
just
broke their tradition.
let me balance that with some more tradition that a lot of people don't realize. There's nothing sacred about the number 9, so we could appoint 3 more justices if we
Oh
wanted
yeah,
to.
absolutely.
So
No,
that's
that would mess it up because it has to be an odd number.
right, but we can appoint 4 more justices. We can appoint 6
Well,
more justices. There's no hard limit, as near as I can tell. It's
well,
just that no
the
one would
reason they
do
did
it.
9 to begin with was because that was the number of districts in the United States, but it's actually grown, so it would be perfectly within the tradition if you want to
Oh no,
actually appoint more
I'm not
judges.
saying it would be a bad idea. I'm just saying that's a thing that's on the table, and the moment someone actually does it, people would say, "Oh, they stole the Supreme Court."
They
Uh,
didn't.
it would not be stolen. It would be unprecedented, but it wouldn't be stolen.
Actually,
Uh,
in that case, it wouldn't even be unprecedented because there weren't originally 9 Supreme Justices. That number's changed over the years.
hey, Darren, will you just let me have this, okay?
No, you've had this entire show, man.
The thing
No.
is,
I
The thing
need.
is, though, they didn't do anything illegal, which
Yeah,
is what
that's my
matters
point.
when it comes to the question of government. Like again, and like the legality of an issue again. Speaking as a Christian does not determine the morality. They can overlap at some points, but they're not always one to one. Just because slavery used to be legal doesn't mean it was moral and something like that,
Right.
and
And
so on.
my only point about the number of justices being unprecedented is that yes, it has happened before. It could never happen again.
At least in our lifetime.
Because of who right because of who we have become.
Oh,
So
Republicans would do it in a heartbeat.
I don't. I think even
Go ahead.
Republicans would. I think even Republicans would walk away from that. But
No,
look,
I don't think
it's
so.
kind of like electors. Let me just say this 3 second thing about electors. A lot of people think that we have a vote, and it's a 1-to-1 vote. You vote for, a million people over there voted for that guy, so that guy has a million votes. That's not true. That's not how elections work. It's not how elections work. Let me say it again. Million people in the state of Mississippi vote for Trump. Trump has a million votes. Trump does not have a million votes. There aren't a million votes to be had. The only votes that count are the state electoral college, as it's called. Each state has a certain number of electors that are appointed to them. And so if Mississippi has 3 electors, and if Donald Trump gets a million votes in Mississippi, what he has is 3 votes. If he wins by 1 vote in Mississippi, what he has is 3 votes. This is how the electoral college works and how it's worked
Right.
for
And
a
I
very,
saw
very long
something
time.
that says that if you live in a swing state like Ohio or something, your vote is like twice the vote of someone else who lives
Yes,
in
look,
in a blue state, which is not right.
look
Like
in
which
Mississippi, I could vote for Trump. I could vote for Trump and it wouldn't matter because he's going to win the votes here anyway.
yeah,
There's no power on earth that will stop Trump from winning the electoral votes in Mississippi. So it doesn't matter. It
Yeah,
honestly doesn't.
that's what the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact is trying to change.
I believe in a national popular vote. I wish elections were national, but elections, I said this on the board and got pushed, but elections aren't federal. There are no such thing as federal elections for presidents. There's state elections, and that's why we have state representatives bringing state electors to have their votes of the state ratified. The thing that I was going to say, though, and the reason I went
but
down this rabbit hole
yeah,
is that there's this bit of interesting legality that was kind of questioned the last go around, which is that electors technically don't have to cast their votes for the candidate who got the most votes. They
yeah,
technically
they can change their
don't
mind.
have to do it. That's up to the electors, which is why Trump was trying to get new slates of electors in swing states. Because technically, if he could have done it, there is nothing in the law that stops them from saying, yeah, we're not casting these votes for Biden.
For
That's
That's
Biden,
only
yeah.
true in some states.
it's right, but I'm just saying that's a doable thing constitutionally, but it's never going to happen.
It's a legal
It's
thing. Yeah, it's never
never
going
going
to
to
happen
happen.
because imagine being the guy who does that. Like
Right.
you would never live life
You're not going to make
publicly.
it home. You're not going to
Yeah,
make it
you're not going
home.
to make it home pretty much.
So,
You're just going to be the guy people hate. You'd have to be like that guy Snowden. Just leave the country.
yeah.
Um,
People talk about American election systems as if they took civics in America and as if it were a simple matter
yeah, that's the
of
crazy thing. You have people who don't even live in America commenting on it. And it's like, oh, in my country we do it like this. Well, it's so different in America.
right. And
And
to
like,
be fair, Dale does know his civics. We've talked
no, I'm not
lots
even
of times.
talking about Dale. I'm just
So
talking about
anyone who thinks that though, if you think that Dale doesn't know his civics, you're the one who's crazy.
I'm not
So
even I wasn't even thinking of him. I was just thinking of just
yeah,
people I've encountered on the internet. There's like people just giving their
right.
opinions.
I don't understand how elections work anywhere else. I don't know how elections work in Canada.
It's
I
like
don't know how they
talking
work
the
in
vote.
France. I have no idea how it. I don't.
If you win by one, you're the president.
I would
Um,
never. I would never comment. To be honest, on telling someone what to do with their vote or influence their uh,
Election.
election in another country. It's illegal for countries like Russia or China to try to influence our elections. Uh, and it's just downright weird when people outside of a country are so politically invested that they are trying to literally manipulate the outcome of elections in a sovereign uh, state. As a
Well,
secularist,
it's
I don't abide with that, and I just don't see how you can do that as a religionist.
well, I was listening to your shorts, the one when you're talking about Israel and how like Americans are very strong in supporting Israel, and the thing that stuck out was that like it makes sense for these little countries. Whoops, sorry if you're not American. To be invested in what happens in America because America, they're the top dog. They're the big
Right.
guns. They
And,
they're the guy you go to beat up the little guy who's bullying you in the playing field.
right. And to
And
be
so, like,
clear, my
yeah.
objection to supporting Israel had nothing to do with geopolitical realities. My
Oh,
objection was
yeah.
if, in fact, there
Logical.
were geopolitical, good secular reasons to support Israel in that region, I'm all for it. But that's not why we do it. It has nothing
Uh,
to do with why we do
I
it.
think that's no, I disagree with you. I think we do it because of that, but we mask it to sell it to brand it to the religious crowd who's super obsessed with that region.
I hope
We
you're
say
right.
we say it's theological, but it's always geopolitical.
Uh,
Um,
Okay, look,
and it's
look.
because
I'm sorry, Mac, the clock. I'm looking at it.
oh
It's
wow,
past nine,
1:46.
man.
Oh
Okay,
wow, well okay, all right. Final
we're
statements or end it
yeah.
here.
This is it, man. This is
All
it.
right.
So I'm gonna give everyone, including the silent um, master over in the lower left corner on my screen, a chance to say something if they like. I will just say that I've made my final statement, and I will wrap it all up by saying again, please, everybody, let's walk back from the ledge a little bit. Let's not make this the last time we get to enjoy going to the polls.
Brian, that's if you want to say something. Um,
Okay, Brian, I'm going to give you 5 seconds of silence to really think about this. Ah, fuck it. That's not going to work. Okay, Mac.
0 for 4.
all right. Or Darren first. Let Darren say it. You have something to say.
Uh, I would just say that although it's nice to think that politics should be more laid back and everything, I think the reality is that who we vote for matters. If you have any sort of way you want the country to run, then you have to be a political person. If you don't care how the country's run and you don't care about who's doing what or who's oppressing whoever, then it's not really a big deal for you. But if you care, then you sort of have to be a political person. And unfortunately, the right's found this great way to motivate their base, and that's by this sort of outrage culture. Um, and so that's what we're sort of left with is a lot of outrage and once one side goes that direction, then the other side is sort of pulled along with them, and so you get both sides doing this whole um, walking along the edge of the canyon.
So, look, I fully agree, and I will just reiterate again, although I've already said something, I'm just stepping again. The only reasons to care about politics for me is for social justice and civil rights. Um, that's that's it. The rest of it is political theater, and I think history will continue to show that as it unfolds. But yes, it does matter how we treat people, and there are definitely policy issues that have a lasting effect on that. But even if we find ourselves on the wrong side of a policy, I still think that people as individuals will still find ways to grant people who are other than them the right and courtesy of humanity and equality and justice. And we can do on the small scale until we can again do better on the large scale. And so we shouldn't blow up the system, even if civil rights and social justice takes a half step backward,
Yeah,
because
No,
we can take those steps forward again like we did before. It's not
that's
over.
that's a nice, interesting concept, and I would love to agree with it. But how do the normal person in Russia, how do they use the system to fix the system?
Yeah, they're hosed. Mac, you're
yeah, yeah, yeah. Augustine, I think it was, said that government is a necessary evil, but not all governments are necessarily evil. And so, like, governments existing is a good thing, but also it's not like human governments. Human governments existing is a good thing, but they must exist, because if they don't exist, then we're gonna have anarchy, or we're gonna have it's gonna be it's either totalitarianism or complete lawlessness. And so we need a government to restrain and restrict people who do evil. I know you hate that term, but you know what I'm talking about.
I do.
People who steal, people who kill, people who murder, all these things. We need a government to be the umpire, to be the force that stops that.
Yeah,
And
to
so
restrain the worst human impulses.
restrain, yes, to restrain humanity's worst ideas and actions. And so that's why we need it. And so when it comes to the issue of how Christians should be involved, I'd say I admit, like, I'm disappointed at Christians in America. I think it's just because we're too sheltered as a society in general, and also as a subset of Christians in this particular age and time, in that we're too comfortable, and we think that creating creating persecution is how to go about it. In likelihood, we shouldn't even be thinking about making life harder for ourselves. We should be focusing on fulfilling what Christ said: go and preach the gospel to all nations, love your neighbor. Those are the two mandates that Christians have. And when we get too entangled with, I guess, secular politics, what happens is we lose focus from what we're supposed to be doing, and we start talking like we live in a world that's gonna end, like it's like the reality is gonna end tomorrow if it happened. So we should be deathly concerned with what happens in our world today, because there's going to be a future kingdom that's a lot better. And so when it comes to overthrowing government, no, don't do that. It's not wise. It's not right. It's not something that Christ would endorse. He gave you what to do. He told you what to do. You care about doing that thing that he told you to do. Don't worry about what if God didn't really plan for this evil government, and doing calculus and Molinism and all these things, and just trying to figure out, like, maybe let's overthrow this evil leader. Like, that's not in your job description. Do what's in your job description. And finally, the government has a job description. The church has a job description. The church should do church things. The states should do church things. They shouldn't be uh, crisscrossing and trying to do the job for the other person. And in that case, that's where a secular government, secular, I'm using that term perhaps differently, means a state that is committed to doing its job correctly and rightly and morally, under God's, knowing that they're going to be judged by God if they're not doing their job morally. And same thing with the church, but they're different spheres of influence. So I echo your sentiment. I think people need to take a deep breath. Americans need to take a deep breath, go outside, take a walk, be thankful for the freedoms and liberties you have, and just think about how awful it would be if if civil war was happening. It would just be uncomfortable for everyone. It would be like the pandemic again, except it's not germs we're fighting, it's other people. And I don't want to be in a situation where that's a reality. So God's in control, trust him, and don't hate the person that lives next to you because they have a Trump or a Biden sticker. Yeah.
And long live President Sal. And and with that, thank you all for your participation. this is a hard subject to talk about, and honestly, I think we did a damn good job of of talking about it. And I wish the only thing I wish I could go back and replay again is if we could have had a little bit more of Dale's perspective on the show. I had a feeling that he would be here, and I wanted to give him some time to talk about these things and discuss them. If there's anyone out there who, like Dale, is concerned that somehow Mac and I are colluding, um,
Polluted.
this is this. Just all I can say is watch the boards. That guy's a jerk. We don't we don't. There's no collusion, man. We are.
I would never collude with you.
This is
I would
just not
fart.
gonna. I gotta wash my mouth out just saying the words. Look, we
On the
will,
show, we agree. On the boards, we disagree. That's how it's always been.
because
Like,
good conversation allows us to have nuance that the boards don't always allow us to have nuance. I try. God knows, I try to do better on the boards, but he just brings it out of me, man. It's boy,
no,
it just.
I see you say stuff on the boards where I'm like, where did this come from? That's not what we talked about. And I fully expect, like, when this show goes up, I'm gonna see you write something. I'm like, wait, that's not what you said.
I know, right? I'm
That's what
sitting
you
there
said.
at work with a mountain of work, and I've got this other screen open with a board, and then Mac has said something ridiculous, and now I've spent 10 minutes crafting this reply for this person on the internet who was wrong about something. And I'm like, what are you doing? What are you,
No, I've been
what
late
are
for
you
work
doing?
because I saw you say something, and I'm like, I have to respond to this because I can't just let this stay there for people to
So
read. And
I
like,
think I think what
I've
Mac and
been
I
here
are saying is we
for
have a
30 minutes.
problem, and the show is therapy. So
Well, I expect the comment section for this to turn into Biden said this, Trump said this, but I hope that at the end of the day, people are still able to take a step back and be like, we want peace above all, right? We don't want
yes,
war. Some people want war over peace. I don't know, maybe their lives are not as interesting, maybe. But overall, everyone should be seeking peace. And first and foremost should be the Christian, because your religion, your belief, your king is called the Prince of Peace. It's not Prince of War. Um, and so let's talk about this in a way in which we're not fighting each other and calling each other names because we want to be right. Let's find common ground if possible. If not possible, then it's not possible.
right. I mean, so President Sal, so say we all. Look, Mac is not an enemy. He's just a guy who's sometimes wrong on the internet. I mean, I don't wish
I
him
haven't
any
been
ill.
wrong in this discussion. I haven't been wrong.
I just don't, I don't feel that kind of enmity that sometimes comes out on the board. But the idea that we're somehow, colluding or on the same side, we're not on the same side, folks.
We're definitely not on the same
Um,
side. Even with this issue, in a sense, like we did go into the differences, but there are definitely differences in our positions. Um, and like I know Dale always feels like people are ganging up on him, and it's because like we're not like intentionally saying, okay, when Dale comes on the show, we're gonna tag team, and
yeah,
it's just that you're like he has like you have very strong opinions
and
about
I
things.
agree with Dale on a lot of theological things. Like, I mean, I would, even though I have some sympathies, I understand the orthodoxy, the whole thing. I would side with Dale if we were, there was a debate, team up of traditional Protestantism versus Orthodoxy. Uh,
Oh, that's a fight that I would never in a million years ever participate
right,
in.
that's not your fight at all. It's not you're not even on that side of the
That's not
fight.
a winnable fight for both of us.
Well, no,
It's just like
It's not a winnable fight,
a
and I
pirate
think
victory.
I think it's way closer of a call than either side thinks. But I think I would argue with Dale on that one if it had to be argued. There are a lot of things like that. So
I love
uh,
Orthodox Christians, by the way.
I, I
I love
I
them.
do too. Look, I have sympathies for Orthodoxy in the same way that I have sympathies for Calvinism. I think that Calvinism is about the worst virus that ever hit humanity. Um,
How is that even? like in terms of like how, because you're seeing me like say stuff and agree with you and tell
I
you
didn't say that
things.
you were the worst thing to hit in humanity. I said Calvinism is.
But like Calvinism, if it's like, okay, when I read about what people have to say about Calvinism on the internet, I'm like, if that's what you believe, I believe, then I should be the worst human being on the planet.
Well,
But the
you
fact that
are
I
on the
am not
internet.
the
You,
worst person ever
but
shows that maybe you understand what I believe completely wrong.
you
Like,
are the worst human being on the internet. It's just true. That is objectively true.
no, wait, what have I said that's been mean? Like,
Let me just go and read some random posts.
okay, all right.
We'll have that
And
war
again,
one day,
I'm
people.
not using the internet as the gauge because, like, all right, just read a random post.
Look, the internet is a sick place.
No,
So
because I don't think I have never ever called
I
anyone any names. I've never said
I
you're an idiot or you're stupid, or what
I
I've said
know.
is your idea is dumb because,
Yeah, I know.
and that's wrong.
Infuriating,
Or I've said
infuriating.
I've explained, or like sometimes that this happens, and this is a fault on my part.
Look, folks, we're gonna get out of this show before
All
we
right, yeah, let's get out of the show.
really.
Let's get out of the show.
So,
All right,
but thanks so much. And
thanks everyone.
anyone who wants to come, skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com, log your Discuss account, discuss away, send an email, skepticsandseekers@gmail.com. And this is the post. When you see this on the board, you may have a free for all with pretty much unmoderated political commentary. But I ask that you leave the political commentary in this post. I don't care if it grows to be 10,000 comments. Just be there with that. And I will be happy. Try not to let it seep over into all of the rest of the board. And so that is the accommodation that I'm willing to make for that. So next time, in the meantime, we'll see you in the comments. And the next time, until whatever the F, we're out. So let's see. I think that stopped streaming, and this is stop recording, and this over here is stop.